Okay, you're ready to go.
All right, thanks, Vanessa. The Town of Southborough, meeting of the Board of Selectmen, October 6th, 2020, 6:31 p.m. And I will, with larger print that I prepared for myself, giving into my age, my prologue, or Governor Baker's prologue. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of, and I'm going to cover everyone, the Southborough Board of Selectmen, the Southborough Planning Board, the Southborough Economic Development Committee, the Southborough Master Plan Committee, and the Southborough Housing Opportunity Partnership Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive recording of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. With that, welcome everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. And the first order of business is, whoa, we went from 7 participants to 24 participants in a heartbeat. So starting off with public comment, is there anyone interested in making, I see Marnie's hand up. Hello, Marnie, how are you?
I'm very well. How are all you this evening?
Good.
Thanks. So I wanted to make a comment. So within your packet, there is a letter from Valeria Romano, who is an attorney for ComCan. And I wanted to just make a public statement here as you consider this. So my name is Marnie Houlihan. I'm 26 Clifford Road, and I'm presenting myself as a private citizen. And I'm resident and on record a dissent opinion to the approval of the medical marijuana facility located within 1,000 feet of a school zone. So in pertaining to that letter, which I think is in your packet, I want to say page 87, they've expressly stated while municipalities have some latitude to plan for expenses, municipalities are encouraged by the commission to develop a plan that provides a sufficient basis and justification for requiring an applicant to pay the community impact fee to cover the municipality's anticipated costs and provide the mechanisms to monitor the relationship between the fee and actual costs. The commission cautions municipalities against relying on fees that are simply revenue generators and planning their municipal budgets around these fees. The additional $50,000 payment in the host agreement clearly violates the first limitation from their what they cite as section 3D above. So it is their opinion that the payment of an impermissible 50,000 fee could jeopardize ComCan's license to continue operations. And furthermore, they state such a payment could trigger an analysis of the legality of the entire HCA. So I wanted to just make it very clear to the Board of Selectmen that the agreement, the host agreement language under section 4 states explicitly, operators shall make additional payments to the town of $50,000 beginning 2 years following the sales commencement date, which payment shall be used to fund school substance and mental health programs designed to establish prevention and intervention, education and awareness, and or fund the operations of the Southborough Police Department as they pertain to R&D. So I want you to all be aware that they are trying to explicitly state that based on new statutes or guidance from the state, they should not have to be paying the $50,000 agreement. And it's not an egregious payment or anything that we're relying on as a town, but it is explicitly to fund substance abuse programs, and it's the entire rationale for why the host agreement was put in place and the medical marijuana facility was provided their agreement to move in. So I wanted to make sure that you were all very aware of the specific host language that $50,000 funds school substance abuse programs, and potentially the SPD. So I wanted you to be very cautious on making any judgments or opinions on whether or not this is viable for you to reconsider the host agreement. That's all I have to say, believe it or not.
Great, thank you. And without getting into a great deal of detail, that letter, not necessarily tonight, but will be much discussed. Are there any other comments? I don't see any other hands. All right. Then I am going to move on for our 6:30 hearing, application for a Class 2 used car dealer's license for T&L Auto Care Inc. at 6 Turnpike Road. And do we have counsel for the applicant with us?
Yes, I believe Mr. Galvani is in the audience, and they're bringing him over now.
All right.
Would you like me to read the hearing notice, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, that'd be great, Mark. Thanks.
Sure. Legal notice, public hearing, Town of Southborough. Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing on Tuesday, October 6, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. to consider an application from T&L Auto Care Incorporated for a Class 2 used car dealer's license to be located at 6 Turnpike Road in Southborough. The public hearing will be held in a virtual meeting, may be viewed by the public through a link located at the www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. All interested parties are encouraged to view and or participate. Southborough Board of Selectmen, September 22nd, 2020.
Mr. Galvani, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And just preliminarily, you may or may not be aware that we being the Board of Selectmen have received just in the last 24 hours or so a number of communications from the town planner and a town building official. I think you're aware of some of it in terms of concerns about the number of parking spaces. So I guess I am going to, why don't we start out there? Your application packet on behalf of your client was comprehensive and seemed to be straightforward. And but if you could, I'm assuming you're aware of the issue that I'm talking about.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And so why don't we start off there, and if you could just address that issue, and then I'll open it up to members of the board for any comments or questions, including those relating to what you're going to talk about right now. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Paul Galvani, I represent both the 6 Turnpike Road LLC, which is the owner of the land and building, and also T&L Auto Care, which is the tenant and business at this location. And both are solely owned by Anthony Medry. I'm sure the board is familiar with the site. As you know, it's right on the Southborough Framingham town line in the eastbound lane in the Highway Business Zoning District. There is T&L Auto and then Luxury Details. And frankly, I think the park, I'll get to the parking issue in a minute. And I think the application's, quite straightforward. I mean, the primary business here is automotive sales and service. And Mr. Medry would like to desire mostly to purchase a vehicle here and there from the Odessa Auto Auction, which you need either a Class 1 or Class 2 license to do so. And of course, as required by Mass law, the holder of a Class 2 license has to be able to provide warranties and repair service to its buyers. And of course, in this instance, this is a good sized repair facility, and it's his primary business, and he can in fact do so. He's only requesting the right to display a maximum of 5 used cars at any one time on the existing parking lot. They would be on the westerly side, which would be as you enter the site and get into the parking lot. It would be on the right-hand side of the building. No on-site advertising, no banners, no signage, and no additional lighting. frankly, you won't know the difference either from the road or even from the site in terms of the activities which would, any sales would coincide with his hours of operation, which are 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and 8 to 2 on Saturday and nothing on Sunday. So no additional modifications to the site, no additional employees, et cetera. I had been in contact going way back months ago. I mean, actually probably starting in the fall and into the winter in terms of discussing with the town planner whether this would require any additional zoning relief. It had been my opinion. Sale of vehicles.
Mr. Galvani, this is Marty Healy, the chair. Something just happened with your sound, and
Yeah, I covered it by mistake. You can hear me now?
okay, great, thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. What we was asked to provide, have an engineer prepare an as-built plan, which took a while, but which we did, and also a certification, et cetera. When we were getting ready to file, I did provide information to the building commissioner, and she had determined, based on what I had provided, that she concurred with my opinion regarding no further zoning relief being necessary. I think the issue, and I have not seen the memorandum, the town planner did call me this afternoon, and we had a spirited discussion for a while, and we really don't agree on the parking issue. It more concerns luxury details, which is the other tenant. And when this was approved, I mean, there was no tenant, and obviously the property being on Route 9, it was, the approval was submitted as retail. So based on that, parking calculation's pretty simple, and X number of spaces were needed for retail, and then you add T&L onto it, and the determination was that 40 spaces were required and 42 were provided. So there's no argument that there are 42 fully conforming, spaces on the site. As I've been further analyzing this afternoon, it really strikes me that luxury details really is not a retail operation. I mean, they sell and install accessory equipment into automobiles and like SUVs, small trucks, audio systems, but also other things like that. They have a large overhead door, a bay that comes in from the back of the building. They actually have a couple lifts in there, and I think it's more accurately, frankly, classified as under the kind of a general, automotive. It's not clear cut, but I'm sure the board doesn't want to be entering into discussions and arguing about zoning here and parking. So what occurred to me was there's no question we have 2 additional spaces that are not required by zoning. So we have an excess of 2. And I guess if the board sees to approve this, I would ask that the approval allow up to 5 vehicles, but only 2 until such time as the building commissioner and/or planning board provides notification to the board that either by an amendment to the site plan approval or reclassification of the use or whatever, that it's verified that there are at least a total of 5 spaces that are not required by zoning that are present on the site. And I think that would give Mr. Medry the ability to start and just be limited right now to the 2, but then we'll work on this issue because we just can't resolve it this quickly. And I had hoped that I thought this was resolved a while ago, but be that as it may,
Sir, we just lost you.
My approach can be, certainly can be.
Mr. Galvani, you remind me of myself with technology.
No, and on one Zoom meeting after another,
We're still having, sir, we're still having trouble, at least I am. Yeah, and I'm getting nods from the other members of the board hearing you. I'm not quite sure what on your end is responsible for it.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's weird. Yes, absolutely, perfectly now. So talk fast.
I just, I just turned up the volume, so I don't know, were you able to hear my last few paragraphs, if you will?
What we
Oh.
heard, Mr. Galvani, was what I think anyway is a perfectly reasonable proposal on your part, which, if I heard it correctly, is to accept right now and your client would do business with the 2 spots that there's no disagreement about them being available for the used car part of the business. And you and your client will endeavor to resolve any issues regarding the other 3 spots with our building department, planning board, whatever the most appropriate spot is. That's the last thing I heard. If you added more to that, that's where I stopped hearing anyway.
Mr. Chairman, no, that is exactly what I said. And again, I think this can be resolved. It's a matter of interpreting things, but whether we have to appear before the planning board, either formally or informally, or just resolve this with the building commissioner, and the town planner will certainly go forward and do so in a diligent manner.
Okay. Again, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable approach, and I applaud you for coming up with it. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Braccio, if you have any questions or comments on Mr. Galvani's proposal to clear the hurdle that's come up in the last 24 hours or so.
I do. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Galvani, and thank you for being here. You had actually answered a couple of the questions that I had, which was, when did the process start? I will say I'm a little frustrated at the time and the expense that's gone out to the applicant at this point, and the emails that were coming back and forth up until the 11th hour, if I may. I thank you for coming up with the compromise and making things a little easier for us. I think it's a wonderful compromise, but I just want to apologize for my level of frustration and to your client as well. I mean, it's a very tough time with COVID and everything, and trying to find ways to make business work. And where this has drawn on for so long, I'm just concerned and frustrated on your behalf that questions were coming up this late in the game. So I will leave it at that. And again, thank you.
I appreciate that. And naturally, I'm frustrated, but I just have to move forward on this. So.
All right, Mr. Galvani, now I'm going to go to Ms. Malinowski.
Mr. Galvani, thank you for coming. I just had a question, and I don't know if this is for Mark or not, but in the email that we got today from Lori regarding this matter, it says, Karina is saying, since the maximum spaces are allotted based on the site plan approval, no additional can be added. And I think Mr. Galvani has come up with a great compromise so that at least they can start to do business. Do we have Karina tonight to answer to that question? We don't. So I don't.
And Chelsea, if I can
Yeah.
weigh in, I just think that was loose language.
Okay.
I reading through all of the stuff that was submitted, it seems pretty clear to me that there's not a dispute that there are 2 excess spaces that can be used for the business right now.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. And I think that was my only question. I think you gave a great overview of the process, and thanks for hanging in there to get it through.
Thank you.
Mr. Galvani, there's 5 of us. So next up is Mr. Shea for some questions and comments.
The questions that I had have already been addressed, and the only comment that I would make is that I'm glad that we don't need to play the role of referee to try and answer this question that is best suited with zoning and building and or planning. So I think this compromise seems to be a good one to at least allow the applicant to get started. And that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Brian. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Mr. Galvani, thanks for your comments. I also agree that the two current spaces are pretty clearly available there. So that path forward that Mr. Galvani is suggesting sounds reasonable to me. I do think it's important for the planning board to get this sorted out in terms of what they need for the site plan going forward. So I'm assuming that the planning department will follow up on that and figure out what needs to be done, if anything, to get the rest of the potential parking spaces sorted out. So again, sounds like a good compromise in the near term. Thank you.
Mr. Galvani, that's it, except for just a couple of minutes from me. And that is, I think all of us share what Ms. Braccio expressed. Obviously, you know, a new business opening up in Southborough is always a terrific thing. And so we applaud your client for seeking to do that. And I think in just a couple of minutes, he's going to get approval to do that. Again, we share the frustration about the fact that what seemed like a relatively straightforward process got complicated at the 11th hour. And hopefully the next client you represent looking to open a business in Southborough, it won't happen that way. So with that, is there a motion?
Do we have a comment from the public?
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so really we need to close the hearing, but I think before we do that, we should at least recognize the hands that are up.
I see chat. I did not see a hand up, so I apologize for that. All right, that is Mr. Morris, I think. I'm guessing. I think if that's Don Morris, Don, you are now freed up to speak.
Oh, good evening. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I went over this during the week, yesterday and late last week with the town planner, and as late as late this afternoon. And you're right, the two spaces are available. As far as what needs to be done in the future, if there's a revision to the use and size of the project for which the 40 spaces was required and two more were provided, then it's a simple thing of requesting a modification to an approved site plan. So if they need more spaces, if there's an additional requirement, then the applicant should file that a request for a modification, and the board would take it from there.
Great, thank you, Don. Mr. Galvani, you may or may not know that was Don Morris, who's the chair of the planning board. So you got it straight from the horse's mouth in terms of what might be an appropriate next step for you.
Sure, and I would concur, and I will do so. And as an aside, I probably appeared before the Southborough Planning Board when Don was on the board, maybe 30 years ago. So we would go back a few years.
When he was in grade school.
Good evening, Paul. Paul, I remember first meeting you and your father before the planning board back in the early 80s.
I was already engaged in it. Yeah, that's right.
Always good to see you.
Likewise.
All right, thanks, Don. And I think I don't see any other comments.
I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski, Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. The public hearing is closed. And now is there a motion regarding the application?
I will move to approve the application for a Class 2 used car dealer's license for T&L Auto Care at 6 Turnpike Road, as modified this evening to limit to 2 used car opportunities to start.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Purple.
Chairman, I just wanted to clarify, I believe the proposal that Mr. Galvani had said was to limit the number of cars to no more than 5. However, it would be limited for now to up to 2 until he is able to verify or correct the use with the planning board and or the building commissioner.
Yeah, I actually, that would probably, I think that's right. And it would foreclose the need for him to come back a second time. So, Mr.
Which
Shea,
is
will
how
you
I
accept
meant-
that modification? That's
I
what you meant to
accept that
say, right, Brian?
modification. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, it was garbled. I must have been garbled if you people didn't hear it correctly, but I
All
was
right, is
very
there-
clear in saying it.
All right.
So I
Is there
know
a
that.
second?
So
Mr. Stivers, second. Additional discussion? None. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski? Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. The application with those modifications are approved. Mr. Galvani, thank you very much. And again, thank you for your elegant compromise to get us past what could have been a little bit more thorny than it ended up being. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good night.
All right, good night. All right, next item is 3B, renewal of a cable agreement for Charter Communications. And I believe the Cable Committee Chair, is it Mr. Rubenstein or Mr. Rubenstein?
I answer to anything.
Okay, fair enough. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I'm here, good evening. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Cable TV Committee and my colleagues, Kathy Wilford and Will Warren, to, as you said, recommend approval of the renewal license for Charter to operate in the town of Southborough. People may know Charter as Spectrum or Time Warner Cable. Some of you will recall I was before you almost a year ago with regard to the Verizon license, renewal license. And at that time, I think it was Mr. Healy who wondered what we would do to expedite getting licenses done with Charter and Comcast. And we attempted mightily to do that. We met with Charter on February 6th of this year and made a full proposal of what we were looking for. However, we got no response from them for more than 6 months. And really, they've only acted once we threatened to tell people in town that their license was expiring. So it's been a difficult process. In any event, we had hoped to negotiate a 10-year license. You may remember that Verizon was only interested in doing a 5-year license. And while Charter was open to a 10-year license, working out the financial piece of that in a way that protected the town proved problematic. Well, on the capital funding side, Verizon had agreed to provide $95,000 in capital funding. It's actually front-loaded over the 5 years. The 10-year capital budget for SAM is about $157,000. Charter was willing to pay approximately 20% of what Verizon was paying, but they wanted to pay that over the 10 years, which would have netted us about $138,000, remembering that Verizon has given hints that they may be looking to exit the market, and in fact negotiated an early termination provision in their agreement with the town. Our fear was that if Verizon left and Charter was locked in at $38,000 over 10 years, that would leave us short on the capital side. So we proposed a couple of things. We proposed a reopener in the event that Verizon left, or a contingency that in the event Verizon left, the amount that Charter paid in capital would go up. They weren't interested in either of those options, so the simplest solution was just to do a 5-year agreement. The good news is, on the capital side, the 5-year agreement, the amount of capital produced by the 2 agreements over the 5 years exceeds the SAM budget by $32,000. On the operational side, as is noted in the executive summary, 5% is the most you're allowed. 5% of gross revenue is the most you're allowed to get under law. Both Verizon and Charter were paying 4% under the old agreements. Verizon agreed to go to 5%, but only once Charter agreed to go to 5%. So getting Charter to go to 5% gets us Verizon as well. So we get what we're looking for there. The budgets that we work with Sam in putting together were, I will say, aggressive. We told them not to just look for what they needed, but things that they would like to have, or things that in an ideal world they would get. And the budgets reflect that. And we did that for two reasons. One is a market reason. I think we all know that there's a lot of cord cutting going on. And I checked the figures, and between year-end 2019 and year-end 2018, about 180 subscribers in Southborough dropped their cable coverage. And that costs, because of the 5% is gross revenue. When they lose subscribers, their gross revenue go down. So that on an annualized basis is costing Sam about $8,500 a year. So the other thing that we were concerned about was at the end of last year, the FCC issued an order which allows cable providers to offset that 5% with any in-kind contributions that they make. And that includes transmission costs, the cost of installing feeds, that kind of thing. And Charter was very clear with us that they intend to take full advantage of that provision. Now, I might mention parenthetically, Verizon has not done any of that, at least as of yet. So we were concerned that that too would eat into the 5%. So as you'll see in some of the other items I go through, we agreed to do some things to limit that impact. One of them is on the live broadcasting. So as I mentioned when I was here on Verizon, Sam would like to be able to do live broadcasting from the library and the public safety building in addition to the locations they already can. Verizon agreed to provide the equipment to do that, the encoders necessary. Charter preferred to give us cash, so they're giving us $5,000, which Sam estimates is the top end of the cost of what it will take to purchase the encoders. It's an open issue how they're going to tie those into the system, because Charter's indicated they're going to make use of the in-kind contribution provision to reduce the 5%. It appears technologically possible for Sam to utilize the town's fiber line to do this. So those decisions will be made down the road. And I know there's a dialogue that's begun between Sam and Tom LaFlamme and others to figure out if it's technologically possible, what are the costs involved. So that may be a route that Sam ends up going, which will save them from having to utilize Charter and the costs involved in that. We were looking to add an HD channel, which Verizon agreed to do. Charter told us they do not do HD for PEG channels. There are technology reasons why they don't do it, but they don't do it anywhere. So we are not able to get that. Finally, on public buildings, prior to the FCC order, cable providers were required to provide free basic service to all public buildings. Charter indicated that under the new order, they will begin taking the fair market value of the in-kind contribution of that basic service and reducing the 5% gross revenue accordingly. After discussing it, we decided we don't need them. Verizon is still providing it for free. Most of the public buildings already have Verizon, and the few that don't, we're just going to switch them over to Verizon. So there'll be no additional cost passed along to Sam for that service. So that should be no impact on us. So those are the significant provisions of the renewal license. The Cable Committee unanimously recommends that the board approve the renewal license for 5 years. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. This is Marty Healy. I have a couple of comments and maybe one or two questions. The comments are, I remember the conversation about Verizon, and you may think it took a long time. I'm actually impressed with the product you produced in a modest amount of time. So kudos to you and your committee for doing that. I thought the agreement was tight and comprehensive, and your explanation just, I think, underscored that. I wondered what the $5,000 was for, and you have spot on explained that. I guess the one question I have is in terms of the tie-in, where Verizon's providing equipment and Charter is providing the $5,000. You said they are going to do the tie-in. Is that something that falls to Mr. LaFlamme and the town or the cable companies? I'm just curious as to where does that responsibility fall?
Well, Sam is ultimately going to have to make a decision whether they want to use Charter to put the lines in. They have to get an estimate from Charter as to how much Charter is going to value that and offset the 5%. At the same time, they're going to be talking with Tom and others to figure out A, what the technological issues are in using the fiber line, and B, what are the ongoing costs for Sam to do that. And then Sam will have to make a judgment what's in their best interest, whether to use Charter to do it or whether to go through the town's fiber line.
All right, great, terrific, thanks. I'm going to start with Mr. Stivers. You may or may not know that one of the members of the Board of Selectmen is Sam Stivers, and he's got a sly grin on his face as he didn't realize he had this much power, authority, and knowledge in the cable area. So I'll start with him.
Well, I'm wondering what I'm going to do with the $38,000. That's a real plus. Start by pointing out, I've actually been attending most of these meetings over the last 6+ months, and I will echo our chairman's kudos to Mr. Rubenstein and his fellow committee members. It's been an extraordinarily frustrating process, and they deserve our substantial gratitude for their perseverance in keeping Charter's feet to the fire, which they resisted every step of the way, it seems like. I think it's a good agreement. I don't think they could have gotten much more at this point. I would urge Mr. Rubenstein and committee members to be sure that we follow up on things that we can require them to do. For example, the performance bond of $10,000 and the certificate of insurance. Small points, but I think we ought to be careful to make sure we follow up on the administrative parts of that process. And again, good work, and I think we got a good result here. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Shea next.
I would just offer excellent work by the committee, excellent presentation tonight by Mr. Rubenstein, and I look forward to approving the agreement.
All right, thanks, Brian. Ms. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Agree, great presentation. Thank you to your committee and yourself for all of your efforts. Thank you.
And finally, Ms. Braccio.
Good evening, Barry. How are you? Thank you for your presentation. As always, it was spot on. Great job. Please share our thanks, obviously, as you've heard from everyone with your committee. You guys did an amazing amount of work in a short time, and the product could not be better. I only have one question, and I'm sure I know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Council has reviewed this, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Mr. Purple?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Barry, that's great. So again, I think this is great. Thank you very much again for all the hard work that you guys put into this.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move that we approve the charter agreement as proposed.
Second.
All right, additional discussion? None? Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski? That was I, Chelsea?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
All right.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Ivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye, unanimous. The renewal is approved. And again, I'm going to say Barry, so I don't stumble over the last name. Barry, thank you very much. And when are we going to see you again? When are you back again?
Hard to predict. We still have Comcast and their 34 subscribers. So God knows how long that will take.
All right. Well, we're in good hands. So thank you very much.
Don't give an inch on Comcast. We'll take it to the wall.
All right. We are now going to move to the logistically difficult part of the evening, at least for me. I don't know, and this is item 3C in our agenda. Discussion with the planning board, EDC, and other stakeholders regarding potential zoning article for the downtown business village district. And the Board of Selectmen, the planning board, the EDC, SHOPC, and the Master Plan Committee all posted meetings. For the chairs or members of those committees, if you were on at 6:30, you heard, hopefully, that I did Governor Baker's prologue in terms of the remote policy and the availability and access to the meetings for all 5 of the committees. The primary discussion, and I think Mr. Purple sent an email to the, and there may well be other stakeholders out there, I hope so, that the primary discussion tonight is going to involve the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and the EDC. Other stakeholders hopefully will have the opportunity to weigh in as well. But to start things off, for those, the Board of Selectmen have called their meeting to order, and I'm going to give the chairs of those respective committees. Ms. Hale is a step ahead of me. She's got Mr. Morris, Ms. Luttrell, Ms. Jasinski, and Mr. Wood lined up to call their meetings to order. So I guess maybe start with Mr. Morris.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Don.
Okay, do we have Mr. Mills? Is Andrew on there? I can only see the selectmen.
He is.
Mr. Stein is here. No, Mr. Stein.
I do
Mrs.
not
Luttrell?
see Mr. Stein.
I do
Mrs.
not see
Luttrell
Yes.
and Mrs. Houlihan. Okay,
Yes.
planning board is now in session.
All right, thanks, Don. Ms. Luttrell? For the Master Plan Committee? You're muted, Mimi. Still muted as far, there we go.
I'm not sure who's here from the master plan, whether we have a quorum or not. Takes 7 to have a quorum, so I won't call to order unless there's a
I
quorum.
don't think we do at this point.
Yeah, I'm looking at the participants, Mimi. I do not see 7.
I got 4 or 5 maybe. Can't remember all of them. Yeah.
Okay. If that changes, we'll try to keep track of it during the course of the discussion. Ms. Jasinski?
Do we have Mr. Frisch
Yes.
on board? Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Yes.
We have Mrs. Malinowski. Do we have Tom Marcolier?
He is not going to be able to make the meeting tonight.
Okay, do we have Tom Bistfeld? Yes.
Yes.
And we do not have Jesse. 1, 2, 3, 4, and me. We have a quorum, so calling the meeting to order for the SHOPC.
Great. Thank you, Dorianne. And Mr. Wood?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Do I have a quorum? Do you know? Who's here tonight? So is Mr. Moorhead here? Or Miss Duca? Ms. Conley,
Ms. Conley's here.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
No.
I don't believe I have a quorum then.
Okay, well, same thing as with master plan. We'll try to monitor that. And if and when we get to that point, you can call a meeting of the EDC to order.
Well, Mr. Robbins, is Chris in?
Yes.
All right, so I have Chris, myself, and Julie, so only the three.
Okay. All right. But obviously you, the three of you from EDC at the very least are going to participate.
Correct.
All right. Initially, welcome to all. And the Board of Selectmen have had some conversations over the last couple of months with members of the EDC. We particularly welcome and appreciate the ability and willingness of the planning board to make themselves available on short notice for this meeting. What I said, and right at the beginning at close to 6:30 is we've got a decent amount of additional business. And so what I'm going to do is try to put a hard stop. We're starting at about 7:15, a couple of minutes after that. And for everybody's planning, I'm going to try to put a hard stop of 8:45. That'll give us an hour and a half. If we don't fill up the whole hour and a half, that's fine. But if we get to 8:45 or so, unless someone's in the middle of saying something really, really important, we're probably going to recess the confab with all of the stakeholders so that the Board of Selectmen can get on to some additional business that we have on our agenda. So with that as a preliminary statement, let me hope that Ms. Barrett, Judy Barrett, are you out there? I see a bunch of names. I don't see yours. You are. Okay, can we call up Ms. Barrett?
I'm here.
All right. Judy, thank you very much for making yourself available. And give me a couple of minutes just to try to set the table for where we are tonight and why the Board of Selectmen got everyone together. And then I'm going to have a quick dialogue, Ms. Barrett, with you. And then for Mr. Morris and the other members of the planning board, I think what I will do then, after those preliminary remarks and again, a quick dialogue with Ms. Barrett, I'm going to turn to you, Don, and members of the planning board to see if you have questions for Ms. Barrett and particularly comments about some of the things that I expect she and I will touch upon in our discussion. So with that little bit of a heads up, then I'll loop back probably to the Board of Selectmen after that. And then the folks who have done the most work on this EDC, you guys get to go last. So the preliminary remarks, and I'm going to try to keep them very, very brief. And that is when the EDC approached us in the summer and started some additional discussions. Obviously, we had some over the years about what they've called the downtown initiative. I, and I suspect others on the Board of Selectmen, either were already aware or did some research on exactly how we find ourselves here in 2020. And it's interesting because at least going back to 2008, that's how far back I went back to 2008 in the...
What? You talking to me?
John, I think you need to, there you go. And I wasn't talking to you for the record.
All right, muted now.
I lost my train of thought for 1 second. I'll get it back. And that is 2008 master plan is what I initially looked at. And then, and starting then, there is discussion, there's language about looking at Southborough's villages and particularly the downtown district and updating, improving the zoning in that area. We then, the next stop, at least the one next stop I found was the MAPC, which I think is in 2012, and the ULI a couple of years later. And then the housing study that was done, and they all had very, very similar themes, which is obviously there's terrific things about Southborough's downtown and But there's obviously need for improvement, and an awful lot of that need for improvement could be, the engine for that could be updating our zoning. And then we fast forward to 2017 and 2018 and the efforts of the EDC. And then if you look at the efforts that are ongoing with the master plan committee, again, the themes are very, very similar. That there is, there's a great foundation in our downtown area, but there's work to be done. There's creativity to be brought to the table. And a big part of that starts with updating, improving, bringing into the 21st century our zoning for that area. So enter Ms. Barrett. And there's, as I said, been a great deal of work done by the EDC. There's been complementary work done by a number of other boards and committees in town. And one of the things the EDC did is they were able to garner some grants that allow the very technical drafting for a zoning article for the downtown area to be done. And Ms. Barrett and I and others have vetted her, and the EDC hired her, is about as good as it gets in Massachusetts in terms of her knowledge and experience, and coincidentally familiarity with zoning issues in the town of Southborough, which is always a nice benefit. And so she's appeared before the Board of Selectmen a couple of weeks ago. There have been previous and follow-up conversations with her about, with that as lead up to where we find ourselves. Ms. Barrett is charged with the responsibility for trying to do what Southborough has been saying it would like to do since at least 2008, which is update its zoning, specifically having to do with the downtown area. And Ms. Barrett, I'm now going to jump in where you and I had a conversation yesterday, and forgive me if I ask a little bit of leading questions, but it's what I do. But in our conversation yesterday, one of the things that I found very compelling is you describing that for you to put pen to paper, particularly pen that might have some ink in it, for actually drafting the zoning language and the zoning specs for a proposed article. An important element of that for you is to know, as you sit down and start doing that, what it is the town wants to accomplish. So could you give a little bit of an explanation about why that's important and what sort of information input is important for you to have, again, as you sit down and start doing the actual drafting of a zoning article?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think that when you're trying to write zoning for any district, you want to know what it is that people want to see. And that's really a function of a couple of things. One is, you know, what kinds of activity do you want to see when you drive through a business district? Do you want to see shops? Do you want to see banks? Do you want to see offices? Do you want to see people, you know, on the street? Do you want to see people walking down the street? What kind of built environment do you want to see? So that's a big piece of it. It's probably the most important piece. And the reason I need to kind of know that, or anybody working on zoning needs to know that, is that it's going to affect your basic dimensional regulations, which have to do with things like how far back from the street is a building set, how far does it need to be from adjacent properties, how tall can a building be. You know, those things are kind of basic dimensional controls. But we also know today that there are other kinds of tools that shape that affect the shape of buildings and their placement on lots. And that in turn kind of creates energy or dilutes it, as the case may be. So we look at things like how wide are buildings, you know, how much of the front of the lot should be occupied by buildings instead of blank space. You know, where should landscaping go? All these things kind of come together to define what the bylaw is going to say about what this built environment will be. And the clearer that is, the more predictable the zoning becomes. So people who read the zoning have some idea of, if I design a property to meet these various requirements that are in the bylaw, I'm going to get approved. And if I don't design something that meets these requirements, I'm probably going to have a problem. So a lot of it is just the shape of the built environment and what that's comprised of in terms of buildings, infrastructure, and landscaping. The other aspect of the kinds of performance standards I was asked to write involved the land uses. So now you have buildings, what can go in them? And in order for me to kind of write something that's going to make sense to any of you, I need to know what you want to see in the buildings and in the land uses and the activity in the district. So it's why I've been so anxious to try to get some direction about what you folks want. And I understand there may be some difference of opinion about what you want, but I'm sure you can understand from my perspective, if you're asking me to write something, I've got to get some direction. So that's what I'm hoping to get tonight.
I guess the way I'd put it, Ms. Barrett, is I'm not sure there's a disagreement so much
Okay.
as a range of views. And,
Okay.
and I think that's hopefully a little bit of what we explore tonight. Now, in terms of uses, obviously the EDC has done surveys focused on downtown, but other boards and committees over the last few years have done surveys as well that have focused on more broadly what residents of the town of Southborough would like to see in terms of whether it be open space or transportation or commerce or housing and the like. And a big part of that has also touched upon the downtown district. Now, in terms of how does a determination about uses impact the way a zoning article will or won't be written?
Well, uses typically fall into a couple of buckets. One is uses that are, quote, permitted. They're considered uses allowed as of right if they meet the requirements of the bylaw. So, you know, a use might be allowed as of right if it meets certain special design or size characteristics. Some uses are allowed only by special permit. And special permits are typically granted by the planning board or the Board of Appeals. Those are discretionary approvals. So as of right means if you meet the requirements of the bylaw, you can have a widget manufacturing, you can have a retail store, you can have whatever if you meet the requirements of the bylaw. If you are looking for a special approval, perhaps the ability to do something more or something different or something the town's not quite so sure about, then you would go apply for a special permit, and it would be up to the board that has authority to grant that permit whether to extend it to you. And so typically the bylaw would have some standards that would guide that decision. Most property owners kind of want to know what they could do as of right because it's a less risky investment. But if a bylaw provides incentives, sometimes a special permit will look attractive. What becomes ever less attractive is a special permit that's not clearly defined. So, and then a lot of this is market-based, clearly. I mean, you can provide uses in your bylaw that are permitted as of right, but if they're not marketable uses, no one's going to do them anyway. So it's a good idea to pay attention to what's going on with the market in your community and periodically think about that when you're updating your zoning.
Okay, I'm going to ask two more questions, and then Mr. Morris, just to give you a heads up, I'm going to give you and members of the planning board an opportunity to, if you'd like to ask Ms. Barrett some questions, either building on some of the stuff I've been asking or otherwise. One of the constants starting in 2008 and up to the present in terms of the discussion about updating zoning for the downtown area has had to do with housing, and specifically having to do with mixed use. So can you talk about how that how the consideration of mixed use and the consideration of building a varied housing stock plays into, again, the nuts and bolts of putting together a zoning article for something like a Southborough downtown area?
Yeah, I mean, if you want mixed use development, which is exactly what the overriding goal in your 2008 master plan for the villages, I mean, I'm looking at it, reinvigorate Southborough's villages by creating small resident-driven businesses in a mixed-use environment. And I think you're not there yet, based on what I've seen, but mixed use, from a planning point of view, typically means commercial and residential uses occupying the same site. They may be in the same building with housing above a ground floor commercial space. In a large enough property, you might have what's called horizontal mixed use, which is sort of, multiple uses co-occupying the same property, but not necessarily in the same building. But I think what the intent was in Southborough was to have what we call top of the shop or upper story types of housing. And, there are a lot of reasons for that. One is just providing a variety of housing stock that you don't necessarily have. One is the shape of the building. When you want kind of traditional sort of, New England charming buildings that are 2.5 stories and have a gable roof, you need to be thinking about what goes upstairs. And it's, in today, because of Americans with Disabilities Act and a variety of reasons, it's kind of hard to occupy upper stories with non-residential space. So if you're going to ask people to build that kind of building, you need to think about what makes a marketable use upstairs. And the answer is clearly housing. That's why, it's one of the reasons so many communities are doing this. I mean, people want to have people in their villages, in their town centers. You want to have people living in the area. There's a whole lot of reasons for that. Whether Southborough wants it is, something I need to understand. But if you want it, I would strongly suggest that you want to make the rules clear about what one has to do to be able to do it. What requirements does somebody have to meet to create a mixed use building, and make those requirements clear and make them non-discretionary, so that someone knows, if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to get an approval and I can have a mixed use building.
All right, and this is close to a yes or no question, but first a quick follow up on that, a comment, and that is that, and we've got Ms. Jasinski and other members of Southborough SHOPSI housing committee, and I know I'm one of 5 on the Board of Selectmen, but I'm very supportive of what you just described in terms of mixed use, and I'll be interested to hear others weigh in as well. Finally, there's been discussion whether or not there is an advantage, disadvantage. There's one way to go or another way to go in terms of overlay versus drafting a district from scratch. I know the preference that's been communicated to you is to do it by way of an overlay district. Can it be done either way or both ways? In other words, does it make a difference?
Planners today encourage communities to look at their zoning and ask, does the zoning meet our needs? Does it do what it needs to do? And if what we want to accomplish in an area isn't supported by the zoning, change the zoning. And we do that by fixing the use districts that we are dependent on. Some people prefer to do what's called an overlay district, which essentially means you're not disturbing the existing requirements. They just stay where they are. And you create a district that kind of sits on top of the existing zoning. And within that overlay, certain things become available that are not available in the underlying, the existing zoning. You just don't touch that. You just create this overlay, like a bubble that sits on top of the existing zoning, and that has different requirements, different use regulations, different dimensional regulations. So when you're going to that extent, when you're basically writing a new district, most planners would argue, create a district. So in the case of the town center, your choices are to replace the existing business village district in that location. It's not going to disturb the other village business district, just this location. You can create a new district called town center district and replaces what's there. Or you can say, I want to leave the existing zoning the way it is, and I want to create an overlay just for this area that will create additional opportunities and perhaps additional, maybe additional requirements to have those opportunities, but things that you can only do in this location because you're in the overlay. Those are the two options.
All right. Well, Mr. Morris, I am going to now do what does not come easily for me. I'm going to shut up for a while, and I'm going to turn over to you to however you want to do it with your planning board. Questions to Ms. Barrett, comments about some of the things she said, or more generally, comments about the initiative that's got us here tonight talking about zoning for the downtown district. Fair enough?
Yes. Judy,
Hi, John. How are you?
it's the old team, Sam.
I know.
Sam has moved into the selectman spot. You've moved up in the consulting world, and I'm still on the planning board.
I know. Bless you.
Oh, gee. So I think Marty set the table very well with what was on the web and his comments tonight. We need to figure out the direction forward. So I'm going to say a few things about the way I think we should handle tonight, and then I'm going to call on my board members to see to what extent they want to tune in. So to me, I think one of the tasks tonight is to try to go in one direction or the other, the overlay or a new downtown village business district. And I agree with Judy that the overlay, by the time you're done with it, it might as well just be
A new district.
taking out, just taking away extracting the downtown village business district from the Fayetteville and the Corderville. Corderville and Fayetteville, we'll leave that alone. And that would remain, right now the code is, in the code, the chapter for village business district is 174-8.4, downtown, village business district. So what we would do is revise the code that would be 8.4.1.
That's right.
Which would be downtown village business district.
Yep.
And then 8.4.2 would be Fayetteville and Corderville village business district. The new 8.4.2 would be what we have in the code right now as just 8.4. 8.4.1 would be the results of our team creating a downtown village business district. And if we look at it, similar to what Judy says, picture it not just as a village within the town, but just, you could even picture it as its own town. It has dimensions, it has a border and a street and streets, and we could create that zoning just for that pieces of land within the town. So I don't think there's a whole big polarity between the overlay and just creating a new language for that downtown district. But there's one way better than the other, and I personally think that not having an overlay and just creating a new district is simpler, easier to have the public understand, and have it clean within the code. So I think that's one thing that we need to resolve tonight. And Judy, if we do that, if the group tonight decides to send you in one direction or the other, does that help you?
Well, I think it makes it more direct. Yes, I think it would help. That's my opinion.
Is that what you'd like us to do?
It's my recommendation, but I think
Okay.
it's a decision you guys have to make together.
So I would suggest, Marty, that we try to get that piece. And maybe as we go into the discussion, maybe there's not enough known between the difference between the two for people to make an informed decision, or if timing is more essential, then trust the experts, trust those who have more experience with overlay and zoning. So I'll, And then there's other details within the VMUD version 3. Some of it is to be determined right in the text, and some of them, including one number, which is the 8,000 square feet, which in my opinion is scary. But I don't know if you want to get into that level of detail tonight. So I'll turn it over. I'll ask my board members. Mr. Mills, any questions or comments? We'll go to Mrs. Luttrell.
Oh, no, I couldn't. Can you
Oh.
hear me now?
We got you.
Okay.
You're
No,
on, Andrew.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Selectmen, EDC, everyone else. I agree with you, Don. I think, you know, the underlying piece that I know it's been in the master plan since 2008. And I think, Don, I was with you when that was first created. And that was when we did that down in Finn, you know, there were different tables set up all around the cafeteria. And I think it was mainly developers at the one for looking at expanding the use of the zoning and everything for multi-use and everything. And personally, I know this is probably taking everything back a step, but no one's come to me saying we need mixed use. I know it's been in plans and things like that. And every time I ask about the mixed use, specifically in the downtown, where there's very limited parking, it's crowded already, there's no sewer and everything, I get the same question from people on, you know, why in the downtown, where if you look at down by the commuter rail, it seems to make a lot more sense, where people could get on to go into Boston easily and, you know, might not need a car. So I'm not trying to derail the conversation, but I feel like a little bit, we've talked about this multiple times. There are fundamental things that just for the mixed use piece don't really make sense to me for why we do that in the downtown. And even, you know, one other piece too, the 7 locations that were identified as underdeveloped for the downtown, 3 of them are owned by my neighbor, Mr. Aspesi. I talked to him and asked him if anyone ever reached out to him about possible redevelopment, things to do and anything. He said, no one's ever talked to me. So I'm really confused on what's driving this, this whole initiative.
Judy, is it possible that we know that if it's allowed, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will happen, but by having it allowed opens, you know, new thinking going forward. So is it kind of like, if you build it, they will come, if you allow it, they will come, or they might not?
Gosh, in my experience, it isn't like that. You know, not every developer who does commercial property, commercial real estate wants to do residential as well, and vice versa. So, you know, developers who do those kinds of buildings, you know, that's what they do. And I don't think it means if you zone for it, it will come. I think what it does is it increases the possibility that someone might be interested in doing it.
I think that's what I was trying. I think that's what I was trying to say. So that, as Mr. Mills says, maybe there's absolutely no desire for it, but by allowing it, is there any harm?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know why it would. I guess, you know, planners like to encourage mixed use in village locations. So I'm not going to see a harm to it, but it's a policy issue that you guys have to wrestle with. if you want mixed use, then have zoning that says that. If you don't want mixed use, then don't have zoning that says that. But I think if you want it, then you want your zoning to communicate that to people who might be interested in pursuing it. And, you know, as for the other villages, which are beyond my scope, you know, maybe there is an opportunity in some other village, but why don't you try it in one location and get used to the zoning first? If you want to change it elsewhere, you can do that down the road.
Yeah, I think that's the agreed upon approach, is to keep it simple. Look at one village. One size doesn't fit all. What works downtown might not work in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
Are you
Well,
all
it's
set,
just-
Mr. Mills?
Yeah, I'm set.
And no, Mr. Stein. So Mrs. Luttrell?
Good night, everybody. Is everyone, am I heard?
Yep.
Okay. A couple of things. With regards to whether overlay or a new district, Judy's the expert, and if she thinks that that's a better way to go and the way that it's handled these days, rather than doing the overlay, which was a thought of the past, then I'm certainly on board with that. And I'm in favor of small scale mixed use. I think that there was a disconnect between like the forums that were given by the EDC on what they were looking to do within the downtown, and then the VMUD that came out. The zoning that came out was large scale mixed use. The first by right use was just mixed use buildings. So as long as it was under 40 feet tall, it could be however, you know, many square feet. There was no limitation on that. It had limitation on 8,000 square feet for retail, 12 units per acre for residents. But if you didn't do either of those things, there's no telling how big the building could be in by right. So I think there's a disconnect there. Also, it's been said that we're just looking at the village business in the downtown, but some of those lots that were highlighted by the EDC for redevelopment aren't even in the business village, they're Res A. So there's been some confusion there, but I'm certainly in favor of small scale mixed use. I think having different housing types is very important. I think if we want affordable housing types so that younger people graduating from college can stay in town, or older people selling larger homes can stay in town, we have to require affordability. Density does not mean affordability, it just means density. With our developments that are more dense, we allow much greater density and are over 55. And if you've seen what those units go for, they're not affordable at all. So density doesn't equal affordability. If you want affordability, you have to require affordability. I looked over the initial draft that Judy had sent, and that is much more in line with what I would think of as small scale mixed use. She mentions green space and walking, and when I think of mixed use in the downtown and making it more vibrant, you want places for people to hang out and have a sandwich or chat, or they're able to ride their bikes there. And the VMA doesn't talk about green spaces at all. And I think that's very important in the downtown. I think that's it for me for now.
glad you said for now, because we'll probably all go around the horn before we step away. Mrs. Houlihan.
Yes, thank you. Thanks all for having us. So I think in just general perspective, I too, Andrew was part of those 2008 planning with Vera way back in the day. So I have a little bit of scratch my head questioning around this. But I would agree that I think ultimately we are looking for a place that invites people to come back, college kids or people that are older that want to come to a community. So I'm in agreement with Ms. Luttrell around a small scale development. I think we have to be very careful on how we define that. I would also suggest that Judy obviously is the expert here. So I think if the new language to invoke new zoning would be helpful, I think that's the way to go. I do want to just make a couple of comments. So the first is, since we have the floor with the Board of Selectmen, I think first is that since green space is considered, I actually think the open space commission is very important to this, and they should be a group that's a very important stakeholder and actually should be contributing to part of this conversation. So I want to make sure that Freddie and that team with open space is really kind of our constituents in providing the right feedback to you, Judy.
Mhm.
The other comment that I want to make is I'm really just generally concerned with writing new language on zoning when we have an infrastructure issue. And we have an infrastructure issue with the downtown specifically relative to drainage. We've heard different business owners, this is just not okay to continue to build or put on language in a zoning if we can't actually correct for the infrastructure. And I think as Board of Selectmen, you oversee the DPW, and we need to do this right. And if we're going to build a town, we can't just kind of sugarcoat it. We have to go down to the root cause and make sure everything's okay. So I think there's drainage issues, there's wastewater and the septic issues. And so we need to resolve that first. And then when we're there, I think we can move forward and be a collaborator with Judy moving forward. But I just wanted to take that opportunity to voice my opinion there. And I don't think it's okay to continue to invite new building or zoning or planning without solving for the people that have actually invested in our town currently. Thank you.
Marnie, what you're proposing could take decades.
Could it?
Well, you've got the storm drain issues, the septic issues, wastewater, and parking. So is what you're saying we should put this whole effort on hold until the downtown the infrastructure is being addressed?
My question to the Board of Selectmen, is the infrastructure being addressed? If we can't address the infrastructure, I actually can't answer your question, Don. I think
what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So I can see Lisa making notes. So when we go back to you, Marty, we'll have these questions that to you, to the Board of Selectmen, and we can have them answered, I guess. Is that okay, Marnie?
Yeah, I think if they can acknowledge that.
Well, it's just a timing thing, because if they're saying this is going to take decades or many, many years, is the right thing to do to put this whole thing on hold? Or is there any harm in moving forward with the rezoning and have the infrastructure catch up to it? Something's got to come first.
I guess, Don, this is Marty. Mr. Stein is not going to be here, so you've run through your entire committee, correct?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Judy. I have a question for her, and if she had any comments on our comments, and then the planning board will be done.
Okay, great.
All set, Marnie?
Yes, at some point, Marty, I would appreciate a comment around whether that is something you guys see as decades. Because if we as a town cannot solve our infrastructure problems, we have more problems than I thought.
The reason I unmuted is because I was ready to comment, but I'll defer to Don and Judy before I do.
Okay, just Judy,
Yes.
we have the VMUD version 3,
Mhm.
and we have the September 8th Town Center Standard version 1, both of which have been referred to a couple times tonight. Can you tell us and the public the significance of each and the differences? Not in great detail, but you have a town center standard, and then we have the VMUD. Can you just comment on both so that we
Yes.
know?
Sure.
Go ahead.
But I was not involved in the VMUD.
Is the town center standard a evolution of the VMUD?
No, my contract is to write performance standards for this, whatever this district is going to be. And I just want to make that really clear. I mean, my contract is to review and write performance standards for a proposed village mixed-use district. So that's what I've understood my role to be. And therefore, what you got as the Town Center Standards version 1 was my first draft of what I thought the standards would be for what would become a district, whether it's a district or an overlay. You know, frankly, I just didn't want to even discuss that anymore. So, you know, I was just trying to write the standards. So what would you put in the standards? You would put use regulations, you would put dimensional and design standards, you would deal with parking. Those were the basic standards that I put in here to try to get some feedback from people about, you know, whether this is what you're looking for. So that's the sort of standards version 1 is my work. Flawed though it may be, that is my work. The VMUD is not my work, and I don't really want to comment on it because I wasn't involved in it.
Okay. All right. And Judy, do you have any comments relative to the planning board's comments?
Well, you know, the infrastructure issues I'm not familiar with. I don't really want to get involved in that and to have a discussion that, you know, really I'm not prepared to have. I will just say this, my experience is, I did a study recently for the town of Dedham on the impact of their mixed use developments because there was some controversy going on around it. And so one of the things we learned from the conservation administrator was that she was thrilled to have the mixed use projects that were going on because they cleaned up stormwater problems. So they had these older sites that were existing development with issues around stormwater management. And through the redevelopment process, the reinvestment process, those issues were getting cleaned up. So I look at development as something that can help communities actually address infrastructure needs. This is a policy issue for you guys, but I would not hold up development because you think you've got an infrastructure problem the town has to solve, when in fact development may be able to help you solve some of those issues. That's been my experience.
Thanks,
Are
Judy.
you all set, Judy?
I think for now.
Okay, for now. Marty, I'm all set for now.
Okay, I'm going to Ms. Braccio in a second, but just very quickly, in some respects, Judy stole my thunder. Development is a way to at least potentially cure problems. But even more than that, I guess this goes to both something Andrew said and Marnie said. Andrew about the, well, what about out near the train station? And Marnie, you talked about the infrastructure. I don't view this as a zero-sum game. In other words, is it a good idea to look at potential development, particularly housing development out near the train station? Absolutely. Look at Ashland. I mean, I used to take the train by there every day. Haven't for a while. And they've built a ton of convenient to the train station housing just in the last few years. The idea of Southborough looking at that, I think, makes an awful lot of sense. But I think that Southborough looking at that does not preclude and should not preclude Southborough looking at mixed use, particularly from an affordable housing perspective, because I think that's an important component that can be brought to mixed use. And infrastructure, you know, I chaired the Main Street Design Group, and I still have bruises from that. Addressing infrastructure issues in Southborough is not easy. And the Board of Selectmen, you know, I like to think, based on the conversations as I walk my dog up and down Main Street and the like, that the battle that was fought and won for Main Street was an important one, and also is a nice catalyst for what is trying to be done with an updated zoning approach for the downtown area. I mean, it's kind of odd. You know, you look at because of the way the TIP project worked, you know, a really pretty now developing Main Street stops just before our real downtown. And that's going to be addressed. And our DPW has that in line to be addressed. Are the infrastructure issues going to be addressed as part of that? Absolutely. Is it going to take decades? Hopefully not. In some respect, that's going to be up to the town meeting voters of the town of Southborough. But again, I don't see it as a zero-sum game. And if the zoning needs improvement in the downtown area, and there seems to be pretty close to unanimity on that, again, going back to 2008, then we should do that. And we shouldn't delay doing it because there are also some other issues in other areas to address. With that, Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I've been writing my little heart out here. First, I would just like to thank EDC, Marty, and Planning Board for all of us coming together. I think this is a tremendous first step in trying to move this to the next level. I think we can all pretty much agree that I think everybody wants something done downtown. It's a matter of finding out what that is and what best serves, you know, the citizens of Southborough. So that being said, I also support small scale mixed use downtown. I think the renderings that EDC has shown would be something with walkability and green space would be something that I'm looking for. My one concern that I had with the current VMUD was based on the size of the buildings, I don't think that that's what you're getting. And I know we don't want to get into too many specifics, but I think this one for me is key, and this one is important, that when I look at currently what's allowed by right in the VMUD, it's retail not to exceed 8,000 square feet of gross floor area, multifamily up to 12, and then personal and consumer services not to exceed 8,000 square feet. I look at the renderings and I don't see the two tying back into each other. It seems to be a little bit larger. And I think that's why this discussion is so important, that, you know, we can all get on somewhat of the same page moving forward. So I would just like to say, I also support small scale. I think that's what a lot of the reports that are referenced have shown. I know Mimi mentioned it as well, that even through the master plan in 2008, we're looking for something more bucolic of Southborough. It's you know, the small town feel that I know we all appreciate, and a place to be able to congregate, you know, to go to it, make it to a true downtown, to see people walking and families, you know, being able to get an ice cream or, you know, stop and get a bag of chips or something, and being able to take your bike, your family goes on a bike ride. So I think these are things that for me are very important. Also, a couple of the planning board members also touched on some things that I thought were important. I also agree that I think that the new district at this point is really the way to go. I know I had a concern, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the infrastructure as well that Marnie did, is I know that we're kind of doing this in a twofold process. We're looking at wastewater, and we're also looking at the changing the district. And I worry that we might be putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because depending on the size of the buildings, you're looking to do an 8,000 square foot building with 12 apartment units. And depending on the use within the rest of the space, whether it's personal and consumer services or retail services. I don't know that our downtown has the infrastructure or the sewage, septic, wastewater, however it would be done, to accommodate a building of these sizes at this point in time. So I know that there's a wastewater study that's going on at the same time. And one of my questions for Judy would be, without knowing if wastewater is a viable alternative for us downtown, how can we set the size and standards of the buildings and what we're allowing by right? So I don't know, Judy, if you could answer. And again,
I think that part of what we probably will want to understand is, what do you guys mean by small scale? And typically today, we don't do that by a floor area threshold, like whether it's 2,000 square feet or 4,000 square feet. You're really trying to define in your zoning, what is the shape of the building? What's its relationship to the street and its relationship to adjacent properties? That's really what you want to focus on. If you think about buildings that you love in your community, often they are buildings that started out for some other use than what they are today. Not always, but often that's the case. So sort of older buildings that kind of endure. And they endure because there's a form that's special. And that's really what I think you want your zoning to do, more than get hung up on, is the threshold for a special permit 2,000 square feet or 8,000 square feet or whatever. I almost don't think that's even relevant. I think what you want to be able to say is, to be thinking about the width of buildings in relation to the frontage, the ratio of height to setback in the rear, or adjacent to a residential zone. What are the options for a front setback? Do you want it right up at the street? Are you willing to let it go back some if someone is giving you a small pedestrian, resting area? And those things can all be written into the zoning, so that really what you're defining is a place that you're trying to build. Now, that kind of scares some communities because it's so different from the way they're used to zoning. Your zoning right now is like so many other bylaws. It's very dependent on the special permit process. And otherwise, it's just very, very small stuff that almost isn't really attractive to someone who wants to invest. So I'm always going to err on the side of quality more than worrying about trying to define the zoning so prescriptively that you may end up actually not getting anything at all. Or you may end up getting stuff that isn't what you want at all because the zoning isn't clear enough. I would rather see you do that. I don't think that probably answers your questions, but except to say, in terms of stormwater management, anybody who's doing a significant redevelopment project today has to meet the state stormwater standards, period. And so you have a competent town engineer. I mean, you have staff. They're going to review any project for those kinds of requirements.
Okay, thank you. So I guess if we're asking what I'm looking for, the most important thing for me on a small scale, Judy, is something that promotes a sense of community, a place where we can gather, we can say hi to your neighbor, that, you can sit down. I know some of the renderings, the initial renderings that came out were beautiful. There was a family sitting and having a picnic. I mean, just a gathering place, for one of the things like the food trucks, when we do them downtown, hundreds of people come out. It is such a wonderful, wonderful thing. And that's when I envision our downtown is a place and a sense of community. So I guess that's my easiest answer on what I would be looking for. But I think one of the most important pieces as well is, if we're looking at doing some type of mixed use with housing, there has to be an affordability component to it. For me, that's the most important piece. But it's got to be affordability that also benefits our seniors, benefits young families or not even a family, depending on the size of the apartments, giving an opportunity to someone young just starting out, to have a place, and again, sense of community in downtown. But I want to make sure that, it also counts towards our housing stock. We're going towards the goal of 10%. And, I'm more looking for something with some form of incentives, however they may be, but a classic affordable unit that's deed restricted that will carry on. And I think those type of developments also enhance your downtown area as well. So I have other things, but I'm going to leave it at that because I know everybody would like an opportunity to speak before we do our hard stop. But I will just leave that. I am certainly in favor of a new district. And Judy, thank you very much. And I look forward to working with you.
Great, Lisa, thanks very much. Chelsea?
Okay, thank you. So I agreed with a few things that the planning board brought up, and so I'll just touch on a few of those. Mimi brought up the open space with kind of green spaces included, and I think to go along with what Lisa said with the smaller mixed uses, from my perspective, I'm looking for something that makes downtown look like what we all think about it of Southborough, in that, yeah, there's nice places that people can live, but it's also open and people can gather and, walk their dog or, walk their kids or, whatever. So I think those two kind of go hand in hand, that there needs to be a balance between the open spaces and then what we're having for residential. And I'm also in favor of doing the new district if that's what makes it simpler, cleaner, easier to understand for residents. And I think I just have one question for Judy in terms of the parking. So if there's residential in terms of the mixed use piece, are we assuming that that's all going to be on street parking, or is there going to be designated spots for residents to park in?
Don't ask for too much parking, because you'll get too much parking. You want buildings, you want landscaping.
Okay.
If you're going to allow shared uses, then allow shared parking.
Okay.
There's a lot of research that's been done on what we call right size parking. And clearly you're not in a transit district when you're in the town center area, but a lot can be said for kind of essentially shaping the tendency of a building by not over parking it. And so allow the developer to figure out the market. Let the market drive the parking, and don't, all of our towns, you guys too, require so much parking. And you end up kind of getting sites that are overpaved. And then people complain because you're losing open space. I mean, you can't have it both ways. So I would just say my preference would be to write the parking. Well, as a planner, I would say you should be setting maximum parking, not minimum. But I know that that's a lot for towns to swallow. So I would just say the minimum parking requirements need to be soft, recognizing that this is a building that's going to have multiple users. You demanding parking at different times.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have, Marty.
Thank you.
Brian, Mr. Shea?
Yep, thank you. I'll be brief just so we can get to the other boards that are on the line. As far as the answer to the question, what to see downtown, I guess my general answer is people, before, first and foremost, people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there have been studies done to identify what people want to see downtown. So, those ought to be what we focus on, setting up the zoning to accomplish, to allow those uses that'll get the people there. And yes, maybe there have been limited amounts of people that have attended the meetings and have provided feedback to surveys, but those are the people that have taken the time and effort to do it. And they ought to be heard as well, because we're not going to be able to reach out to everybody. I think the town, I agree with Marty. I think the town has taken a first step to improve accessibility to the downtown with the state project, plus also the town project that's going to continue the work of that project. I think we've created defined sidewalks, bike paths. We've created the means for people to get downtown safely. As far as other infrastructure issues, I think that we need to tackle them hand in hand. The zoning has to be done concurrent with the remainder of the infrastructure. We can't go to town meeting, put this zoning process on hold, go to town meeting to identify a solution to the wastewater and not be able to say, well, these are the businesses that we're trying to attract by building this wastewater system. I think that we need to have a plan in place. Conversely, I agree with Marnie. I think that we can't just go to town meeting looking to solve the zoning problem. We need to be able to address the fact that there are infrastructure issues that need to be solved as well, but they need to move along parallel tracks in order to be done correctly. So those are just some of the thoughts that I have. If nothing else, hopefully we can come to consensus on creating a new district as opposed to the overlay. I think that was the question that I had. Be curious to hear if there are other boards and committees that have differing opinions, but it seems to, so far there's been consensus on creating a new district as opposed to the overlay. So that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Brian. Sam, indulge me for 1 second. And that is, I just want to ask Judy a question. Putting aside the overlay versus new district question, are you getting information that is going to be helping you as you take that next step, which is to sit down and draft a proposed zoning article? Again, as a lay person, particularly when it comes to the zoning world, it feels like there's information that is helpful. I just want to make sure that we're accomplishing that other component of it.
I think so. I mean, I've been taking pretty copious notes, so I do think it's helpful. I mean, I have some thoughts about some of the things that have been said, but I'd rather have all of you guys finish what you have to say first, and then maybe if you give me a minute to respond to some of the comments, that would be great.
All right, next up is Mr. Stivers.
Thanks, Marty. And again, I've been taking notes too, and I'm going to throw out a bunch of sort of stream of consciousness kind of thoughts, not to necessarily discuss them, but like to get them on the table. I think Andrew asked an interesting question. Why are we doing this? I think one of the reasons fits in with what Lisa and others have said in terms of finding a place where people can gather and create sense of community. And I think downtown has a set of assets that are pretty powerful there. You've got things like St. Mark's, Fay, the downtown businesses, Southborough Medical, et cetera, there that can, Woodward School, for example, that can create people who are nearby, and in addition to the residents in that area, to drive what could be a thriving community center there. So I think that's an important thing. I certainly defer to Judy as an expert in terms of how you develop one of these districts, but I think we're relatively the experts in terms of what can get approved by town meeting. And I've heard one argument that an overlay may be easier to get approval for, in that it could be viewed as less threatening by current residents in that particular area. I don't have a strong opinion on that. I certainly agree that a fresh start makes a lot more sense technically. So I think I would support that, but I think you got to worry about how you can communicate it to people to convince them that it's not going to detract from what they have today.
Mm-hmm.
I would urge us not to be limited by wastewater or stormwater considerations, and that I think technically you can solve those problems. Infrastructure is interesting. I heard an interesting conversation, I guess yesterday, at the Capital Planning Committee, where they were suggesting that there's great value in towns being prepared to propose infrastructure plans. Depending on how the upcoming election turns out, there may be a big push at the federal level to provide funding for infrastructure projects. Mm-hmm. So I think that interesting possibility to figure out what we need in that particular part of town. I think that people have talked about the need for space to do things, for gathering places, et cetera. I continue to believe parcel 5440 behind the House of Pizza is an interesting catalyst for that. And I think that could create many opportunities to create recreation play areas, picnic tables, food truck sites, et cetera, to sort of unlock potential for doing a variety of these other things. I think that we also ought to consider at this point, does it make sense to think about a larger footprint for the downtown area as we're doing this? Again, I'm not pushing for it, but I think it's a possibility to think about. And I think that it's important to consider how we actually produce a structure that will allow us to move forward quickly on this as possible. Not going to happen quickly, certainly, but as quickly as possible. I think you need to think about things like a project manager. We've got a large group of committees locally who are involved appropriately in this, but you need to have somebody in charge. And so I think that it's an interesting concept to think of a project manager somehow appointed to keep coordination and progress going, as well as a clear project plan. We've had a lot of great ideas here. I think writing down a lot of these things and saying, okay, this is the picture that's developing out of this of what we want collectively, and then letting somebody take that and push on putting all the pieces together to define the key pieces that need to happen sooner versus later, et cetera. So there's I see a real management problem in here that we need to think explicitly about. So those are a series of random thoughts. Again, I think we've had some good ideas. Great to get this group together, and look forward to doing this again at some point fairly soon. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sam. Mr. Wood, we have now exhausted the planning board and the board of selectmen. And do you want to take over? And I mean, I know that one quick thing that the EDC, which has put in a ton of work on this, an overlay district was a very strong maybe preference, but at least possibility that the EDC settled on, and maybe address some of the concerns about that, because I agree with Mr. Morris that if we could, coming out of tonight, I mean, we just heard Ms. Barrett say that she's getting some good information on the second component, but going back to the first component, if we can get some sort of closure on whether or not we're going to be looking at an overlay or a new draw, obviously that would be that'd be very helpful. So there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the EDC has ever been hung up on an overlay. Initially, we wanted to, when we first spoke with planning years back, we had wanted to do an edit, and they said that wasn't going to be good enough. And I think it was, anyway, it was suggested we do an overlay. So whatever gets it done is in my opinion, what would support. So if it's a rewrite, a new district, an overlay, whatever gets the mission accomplished, to me, I'll defer more to my committee and Julie after, because I believe she's on, and let her speak to this because she's been more involved. But I don't think the overlay or a new district is an issue for us at all. So whatever, if everybody thinks a rewrite works best, we're good. I'm pretty sure we're all good with that. Was that your question, or?
Yeah, it was. Again, I'm leaving it to you to sort of pull in the other members of your committee. I see, I think Mr. Robbins has his hand up, but I'll leave that to you about order and how you want to run that.
I'm going to let Julie go first. Is she in? Ms. Conley? Julie
yes,
there?
or at least she was.
She's there with her hand up, so
yeah,
Vanessa could bring her in.
Yeah, I'd like her to be brought in because she could speak to it more. I know she's been more involved with Judy as well as you, Mr. Chairman, and
okay,
and with planning.
Vanessa, do we have Julie Connolly? Yes, we do. Now you're muted, Julie. Just unmute and you're all set to go.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So thank you to Board of Selectmen for putting this together. I think this is a great start. I did want to just address a couple of the issues that I heard about, and I think we've gotten some really great comments and feedback tonight. As far as the question of why mixed use, I appreciate that discussion, and it's something that the EDC has been thinking about for about 3 years now. And the reason why I think it's important for the town and the community as a whole, one is certainly because it seems to be what people want. We put out a study almost 3 years ago now, I think, and there was very strong support for it. Anybody who's involved with any sort of municipal planning knows that that's kind of a what sort of how development is happening right now with mixed use. And I know that, I believe it was Judy had mentioned also that you run into a problem when you have multiple story buildings in a more downtown looking environment where you can't really do retail on second floor anymore due to ADA and other considerations, especially when you're looking at, you know, some of repurposing some of these older buildings. That just doesn't work. I know, I believe some of the members of shops here on the phone too, and it's something we've talked about with them. I strongly agree with Lisa. You know, I'd love to be able to get an affordability component in here. I think that's important, but also just more generally diversity in housing stock. It's something that Southborough struggles with, and it has ramifications for our local economy as well, because we have a lot of great businesses in town who we've got, you know, a great diversity of business in town, which we're very, very fortunate to have. But sometimes they struggle to find talent because, you know, if you're a young person who's, you know, wanting to, you know, come and work for a great company, you might not want a 4-bedroom colonial for $900,000. That might not be what you're looking for. So just general diversity in housing stock is for young people and for seniors looking to downsize and stay in town, I think is really important. Also, mixed use is in line with the governor's mandate and the governor's economic development plan. That's what the state is pushing for. So, and again, we got very strong support on that when we put out the downtown initiative study a few years ago. So it is something I think that our residents support. And just one comment too, just because Andrew had mentioned about reaching out to the Aspazies. We have spoken with them. I don't know, I'm hoping everyone's been able to see those renderings. I think we do have them available if people are interested to put them on the screen. If not, we can certainly get them to you by email after this is over. But we did reach out to the Aspazies and they are aware and they were supportive. I believe the feedback was pretty positive about potentially working with us or with whoever is involved with redeveloping space in the future. So that is something we have explored. And so those are just a couple of the points I want to touch on. Also, a couple other things, green space, trails, community space, that was where we started. That's been a part of our discussion from the beginning. We explored 4 different options, 4 different areas when we started talking about this. And one of them was green space / beautification. So it was the idea of having park benches, of having bike racks, of having trails, and you know, connecting some of the other trails we have in town to the downtown area to make downtown more accessible for pedestrians. So those are certainly things that we fully support. And as far as getting into details about the size, I agree. I mean, I'd say throw 8,000 square foot retail out of your minds for now. I mean, that's not necessarily what we're looking for. We want something that works, and you know, I don't want that to scare anyone. So that's, you know, I'd say don't worry about that. Let's do what works and follow Judy's advice and put together a vision. I think what we wanted to get out of here after having multiple conversations with Judy was that we just want to, you know, get everyone on board with what we think the vision is, so that Judy can put together a more detailed draft for us to look at. So, you know, or are the renderings that we put together last year that we've shared with you, I just want a sense of whether people are on board with that, and if that should be the starting point for writing the terms that Judy has been engaged to write. And my last comment before we go, overlay versus separate district, I have no strong affinity either way. You know, I think I would be happy to pass that decision to the planning board, to Judy, to whoever wants to make that decision, as long as it gets us the ends that we're looking for. I think whatever is easiest and cleanest makes the most sense to me. And happy to answer any questions that anybody has as well.
That is okay.
You're in charge, big guy.
I think, did you say that Chris had his hand up and wanted to speak?
He did, yes.
Could you allow him to speak, please, Vanessa?
Hello.
Hey, Chris.
How are you? Well, look, I want to applaud the Board of Selectmen and the rest of the other committees, all of us, for getting together. Collaboration is the name of the game today, and you're demonstrating by bringing us together your exceptional leadership here to make this something that we can be proud of and leave a legacy for this town. This has been a project that's been talked about for a long time, and the work that Julie and the EDC, the Planning Board, and others have done deserve commendation, and we've just got to keep the momentum going. So I think it's important that we set other meetings up with deadlines for all of us to get in agreement, because we all know presenting a option for town meeting has to be clear. There has to be unanimous consensus that this is what we support and we're ready to go. And we got to make sure that we get the final input from other key community leaders to ensure this happens. So I just commend you and continue this level of collaboration that will ensure the legacy of this really vital, important effort. Because if you go around and look at all the other towns, who thought Hudson could refurbish a Rotary Circle? Everybody thought Hudson was dead, and it came alive. And the same thing with each community. Framingham, the mayor, we're open for business. We can't thrive without a vibrant business community. And our approach has to be an inclusive one. There is so much anger about business and the press and what they do or don't do, but they are vital to jobs, vital to the income we derive from them. And they're a part of this community. And I think it's, we've got the makings of a great effort here that I think will conclude in a way that will be welcomed by all. So again, thank you. And I look forward to our next session as a group so we can launch this.
Marty, real quick, I think you skipped over Shopsy, and I think there was Dorian. I don't know if I was the only other member of Shopsy that may have wanted to speak earlier.
No. I'm going to get to, basically, I want to exhaust planning, selectmen, EDC, and then I'm very aware that Dorian is lurking. So
okay, I just wanted to make sure.
I'm lurking.
But to me, it sounds like everybody's relatively on the same page. It's just a few semantics, small scale, large is on it. When Judy had asked about visions of downtown, mine's a walkable, connected community spot. I agree with that. I like our renderings that we had done before. If we could do something like that, I think that would be great. When Ms. Houlihan had asked about if we had been looking into wastewater and infrastructure issues, we have. I've toured some wastewater plants with Mr. Stivers in the past. Things are getting looked at constantly by us, and we've been presenting to you. I think everybody's going in the right direction. Where everybody's trying, everybody's coming together to work on this project, and I appreciate that more than anybody here knows. So thank you for that.
all right, John, have you exhausted your EDC folks as far as you know?
I believe it was just myself, Julie, and Chris are one, and I don't know if Ms. Munsif would like to say anything or bring anything up, but Marika, if you're there and you want to say anything, raise your hand. Is she on still?
She's on, but not hand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave, and it actually makes sense to cover the committees first.
Okay.
And so.
I don't have anything else. That's it for us.
All right, John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dorian, I know the word I got was that you folks were convening a meeting. First of all, do you have a quorum for your committee?
We had a quorum when we started. I'm not sure if we still have a quorum.
Okay.
I believe Alex should still be in the audience, John Wood, Chelsea, Tom Bisbell, and myself. So we should have a quorum if they're all still here.
All right. Well, the only reason I asked that is because I'm going to suggest that when you and the members of your committee finish that, because we're going to finish shortly after that on this subject, that somebody move to adjourn your meeting.
Okay,
We'll take care of the other three that are have quorums after that. But if you could adjourn your meeting. So with that, fire away.
okay. Well, thank you, Chairman Healy, for having ShopC participate tonight. ShopC has actually just finished and approved a brand new housing production plan. We're very interested in helping facilitate affordable housing in the downtown area. Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, went into effect in 1969. That law requires that every municipality in the state maintains at least 10% of their year-round housing stock as affordable. As of today, Southborough is just over 8% of the required 10%. I actually believe we're at about 8.36%. We actually need 49 more affordable housing units by the end of 2020, which is in what, 2.5 months? And then after that, we're going to need 66 units to actually hit that 10%. And with the zoning the way it is, and restrictions on land and not a lot of land available, it's very difficult for the town of Southborough to actually hit the 10%. But with the new housing plan, we're hoping we can facilitate more housing with our mission in mind, and to try to come up with some strategies that we can implement. So one of the things we looked at was to possibly start doing some kind of revising the zoning regulations to provide for the mixed use, which is what EDC wanted to do downtown. Maybe, even consider removing some barriers for multi-family housing, and, create the ability for life cycle families to live, older families to parents to live with families, and just change some zoning laws for that. Judy, so my question, after looking at the new HPP and things that we're trying to implement, what are your views on easing the regulations for the multifamily units in the downtown area of Southborough that the EDC is talking about?
You mean in terms of upper story residential?
Yes, so we can get some affordable housing there.
Well, I'm kind of glad you brought this up, because this was something I wanted to come back to. You have an existing inclusionary housing bylaw that, as I understand it, triggers at 8 units. Is that correct? Does it apply to projects with 8 or more units?
Don't anymore.
Pardon me?
I don't know.
Okay. Whatever the trigger is for any other type of development should be the trigger for mixed use. I would not try to subject small projects in a small downtown area to a more onerous affordable housing requirement than you apply to any other type of development in your community. So whatever it is that triggers the inclusionary housing bylaw under major residential development, which I think is where that provision resides. Don, jump in if you think I've got this wrong, but
it's not there anymore. It's been removed.
Okay, I was not aware of that. You guys have to decide what you want this district to be and what you want it to do for your town, recognizing that it is a small district and we're talking about small projects. If you try to load too many expectations on projects in a small downtown, in projects that you've all said you want to be small, you may not get anything. So I would just say whatever requirement the town wants to apply to other types of development in order to obtain affordable housing from those developments would be the same threshold, if you will, that you would apply to development in this district. So, it's not uncommon for inclusionary housing to trigger at, say, 10 units. So, if that were going to be the town's policy, then that's what would apply in the town center district. Or, sometimes inclusionary zoning will trigger at 8 units. And if that's the case, then it would be the same. But I'm just saying, don't apply some other standard to these very small projects in a very small district, because it's already not going to be that easy to get the kind of development that you want, given that you're so concerned about scale, which I'm not saying is wrong. I'm just saying that's the reality. you all want small projects, so you're going to get small. And if you try to lay too many expectations on these projects, you're not going to get anything. That's my experience. I've been working with 40Bs for 33 years, and it's near and dear to me. And I think it's important for you guys to be having these conversations, but I'm just saying, be careful that you don't lay too many expectations on a single, very small district.
Okay, Judy, with that in mind, with the 40B and the restrictions, and I understand it's a very small area, but if we're talking about multi-use and we're talking about smaller scale, like single units that possibly like a young person or an older person could live in above retail, if they were zoned or not, I don't know if the wording is zoned, but if they were a 40R versus a 40B and we could get affordable housing, would that make a difference? Or what do you feel about like making it a 40R versus a 40B for affordability?
That's a pretty small area for a 40R, although I often have to remind even myself that the very first 40R district that was created in Massachusetts was for 16 units. It was for the redevelopment of a former rectory for a Catholic church that had closed. So 40R districts don't have to be big, but they have to provide for a certain amount of density. And if you don't meet those density thresholds, you won't get a 40R approved by DHCD. So this is a kind of a small district. I mean, I'd have to really sort of look at what the possibilities were, you know, in this area for a 40R. I'm not prepared to comment on that. It just really wasn't something I had been asked to look at.
Okay. I'm gonna go to my board for other questions and comments, and I've got a burglar alarm on my house in New Hampshire, and I'm the only one who can get this, so I'm gonna just mute myself and deal with that. And Tom, would you have any questions? Vanessa, if you can let him speak.
Sorry, is this Tom? There's a couple of Toms. You're talking
There
Tom
you go.
Messico? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dorianne, and thanks to the whole board as well. And I wanted to just pick up really quickly because that 40R is a subject we've been talking a fair amount about in our SHOPC meetings, and maybe talking about is me sort of proselytizing about it. And I don't know how much, you know, other boards have really considered 40R. But just to give you a couple of quick highlights, you know, 40R is, as Judy knows, is the smart growth zoning district that really checks a lot of the boxes we're talking about. You know, they're really conceived for downtown village centers for mixed use developments. And the beauty of it from SHOPC's standpoint is that there is a housing component to it and an affordable housing component to it. And, you know, I think there could be a lot of advantages to the town if we did the zoning as a 40R, because we'd be able to do all the same things we've been talking about, but there are significant state benefits to doing it as a 40R. So if we just, you know, as part of our ordinary zoning plan for mixed use in this development, and let's just say we sprinkled, you know, 25 units over the entire district in terms of zoning. If we got that, that'd be terrific. If we get 25 new units of housing and badly needed housing in the town of Southborough, that'd be great. But if we did it as a 40R, just by zoning it for 25 units, DHCD would give us $75,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then for every unit that was actually constructed, they'd give us an additional $3,000. So if we had 25 units, that'd be another $75,000 on top of the $75,000 they gave us just for zoning it. And on top of that, there's an educational component where the DHCD will reimburse the town for the delta in the increased school costs for families that come in. So there are a lot of state benefits to doing a 40R project. And, you know, if we did it conventionally, we could have the same result, but without those state benefits. And going to Judy's point, Judy, I know this, you know, we can talk about density. We wouldn't necessarily want super high density right in the center of this downtown district on Main Street. But if we're extending this down Newton Street and down Boston Road and even back on Park Street, I think there's opportunities there for some more dense housing. We're not talking a 10-story apartment building, but, you know, some townhouses, some small, maybe 10 or 15 unit apartment buildings I think are not out of the question to go down on some of those parcels that are sort of on the periphery of the village district, but would serve the village district. Those are the people that would attend the shops and things like that. So I think it's something that the board and EDC should consider.
Oh, I'd agree. It's just that it's not within what I'm doing right now, but I certainly agree with you that there would be opportunities in Southborough to look at a chapter 40R district. I just don't think this little town center is probably the place to do it, but certainly around it and in other parts of town. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Tom, anything else?
I'm good. Thanks, Dorian.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Okay, Alex, are you still there? I don't know if he's there because I can't see.
Yes, he's there. There he comes.
Okay. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, I just mic'd myself. I don't think I have a whole lot to add. That my two pet peeves are just going to be obnoxious to everybody, and that is I'd love to see public sewerage, and I think that would maybe increase the zoning so it doesn't get overrun. But other than that, I don't think that's the purview of what we're talking tonight. Although I honestly think it ties in more than we admit.
Okay. Anything else, Alex?
Nope, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. John? Mr. Wood?
I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you.
And Chelsea? And Chelsea's good. So that's it from Shopsy.
All right, why don't you entertain a motion to adjourn so I don't have to worry about Shopsy anymore.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, it'll be roll call. Alex?
Aye.
John Wood?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
Dorian? Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Chelsea.
Hey, John Wood, don't go anywhere. You guys need to adjourn too. Then it'll just be us and planning because it's 8:48.
We didn't have a quorum.
All right, then see you later.
Do you want us to stay on for the further down your agenda for the shared space grant?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Morris, any additional weigh-in by anyone with the planning board? If not, I'll give you the opportunity to adjourn your meeting as well.
Anyone from the board have anything more to say? Questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Mills?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks. Did you want us to leave, stick around, or can we go?
Entirely up to you. But before you either tune out or stick around, thank you very much again for making yourselves available and for I think was an important and productive discussion. So thanks.
Agree and thank you very much.
Thank you, Donnie.
Marty,
And
there's
the
a
rest of the
tree
planning board, and
discussion
thank
on
you,
the
Shopsy.
agenda that the planning board might have an opinion on, so I don't know if they want to stick around for that.
What was that, Sam?
There's a tree discussion on the tree policy on the agenda for at the end of the meeting. I don't know if we're going to get to it, but the planning board might want to listen in on that. They've had an opinion on
Marty,
that.
if you have a second, I just have a comment. I was on multiple phone calls with the town planner over the last several days, and as recently as again this afternoon, she asked me to respectfully inform the Board of Selectmen that there are 3 items on the that the tree committee still has to work on before it gets the draft gets moved up to planning and selectmen. So I would suggest if you do entertain the tree issue at the end of your meeting agenda, that you defer and let the tree committee finish their work.
Terrific. Music to my ears, Don. Especially it'll probably be about 10:45. So no, thanks for that heads up. It makes sense to do. So again, welcome to stick around. We are gonna move off of this. And I guess the final thing is there may be some other, as Mr. Purple, headlined in an email that he sent, the primary focus tonight was to get Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, EDC. We had Shopsy weigh in as well. Believe me, we will provide ample opportunity. We understand whether it's the trails folks, the open space folks, anybody who's paid attention to our meetings knows I've got a particular bugaboo about the incredibly vibrant arts communities in Southborough and tying them into the discussion as well. So there will be ample opportunity. It's just that apologies, but we need to move on to the rest of our agenda tonight.
Marty, just what, so we all know, what's the next step with downtown?
Well, I mean, it's going to take place, Don, on a number of levels. Judy has got some information tonight from some of the important players in the whole process. I'm taking her at her word that it's been helpful, and that it will enable her to start, again, writing in pen as opposed to pencil in terms of some of the regulations, the revising of the zoning article. But there's also going to be, I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
The next step is Judy?
Yes.
It's Judy, but there will be, parallel tracks as well.
Right.
We're going to try to get input from other stakeholders, and not just boards and committees in the town, but stakeholders. I know EDC has reached out to folks in the area. That's something that I think that we're obligated to do as well. So, there's spade work to be done in a number of different areas, but on the drafting side, that shifts to Judy. And again, hopefully she's gotten some helpful information that's going to guide her writing.
I think I have.
Terrific.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank
For
you.
those who are leaving, good night. Judy, you can leave too.
I can go now?
You
I'm
can
done?
go. And thank you very much. Incredibly helpful.
Judy, thank you. This is John. I appreciate you coming out tonight.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Okay. Good night.
Good night. Thank you again, Planning Board and Shopsy and Selectmen.
All right. Next up, Chair's report. It's amazing. When we put the agenda together a week ago or so, there were, there were the two items that I wanted to address: the liaison assignments and the selectmen goals, both of which I thought were going to be quick as can be. And my list grew over the week. So bear with me as I march through this. Number one, Shopsy, and we don't have to set a meeting date tonight. That's for an agenda item. Shopsy has reached out through Dorianne and requested a meeting about some of the things they talked about tonight, and specifically having to do with potential funding initiatives. And I think that's a discussion that ultimately we'll need to loop the community preservation people in about as well. I had the town accountant do a little research assignment, and Shopsy was right in their instincts that there's basically four prongs of the CPA. There's open space, there's rec, there's historical, and there's housing. And housing has very much been the poor cousin of that group in terms of CPC, CPA initiatives by the town of Southborough. And particularly in the environment we find ourselves in now, we've talked an awful lot about inclusivity and the like. I think it's time to think about rectifying that. And Shopsy has reached out on that score. The flagpole letter that we sent got a response that is more favorable to getting this issue resolved short of litigation than had been the case before. Mr. Purple, correct me if I'm wrong, but the option that is going to be pursued, discussed with the folks at Crown is going to be basically to return the flagpole to the condition that was in before that condition changed.
That's correct.
Okay, and that's the quicker option. It's it'll be the flagpole that we've gotten used to over the previous years, and if and when there's a commercial option, then that might preserve that as well. But knock on wood, we've moved from a contentious, potentially litigious stance to one that appears at least inching towards cooperation and getting this thing resolved. Let's see. Historical. We've been reached out to by the Mass Historical. I don't know what the formal name is, but there's an old sign that used to be at the intersection of Route 30 and Parkerville that the Mass Historical folks have determined has some significance, and no cost to the town of Southborough at the front end. We're going to give them the green light to do what they need to restore that sign. And then we are going to, then my proposal would be to engage the Mass Historical, our Historical Commission, our Historical Society to determine it can't go in the place it was in before, and what an appropriate place would be for this. It's a couple hundred years, possibly year old sign. So that'll be in the offing. Again, no cost to us. Mass Historical folks are going to take care of it. I watched the capital planning meeting the other night, and there's two items for that. Number one, they pressed Karen, I think correctly, to put together as many shovel-ready projects as possible on the DPW side of things. And I just want to make sure that we're reaching out to others beyond DPW who might be able to, again, we wanted to have that shelf available for shovel-ready projects whether it's Governor Baker's penchant for making grants available to communities, or I think whatever happens on November 3rd, there's certainly the strong likelihood that there's going to be a big infrastructure bill coming down the pike in early 2021. And the more we have things ready to go, the more we might be able to benefit from that. The second thing having to do with capital is they, through their chair, reached out 10 days ago or so about setting up a meeting. I was hopeful that we could do it on October 20th. October 20th has rapidly filled up, even 2 weeks out. So I think it makes sense to think about a special meeting just with the Capital Planning Committee and the Board of Selectmen. We next meet on October 20th, and I guess I would propose a day, maybe Tuesday makes the most sense, but a day the week after for hopefully an hour and a half, 2 hour. Maybe I'll put a hard stop on Mr. Malinowski, or I'll let Chelsea do that. And have a meeting with capital planning. They've done it in just listening to their meetings, and Lisa, obviously you can speak to this. They've done an incredible amount of work lining up potential warrant articles and capital articles for the, knock on wood, hopefully Springtown meeting. So if not the 27th, which is a Tuesday, is there a day the week of the, what is that, the 26th through the Thursday's the 29th? Does that make sense to people, first of all?
Yep, 27th works for me.
Seeing a lot of heads nodding. All right, so why don't we plan on that? I'll let Mr. Malinowski know, or maybe Chelsea, you can let him know. Mark, you and I can make sure that I don't know if an invite's the right word, but a notice that hopefully they're available that same night as well. Let's see, our complete streets. We got a passing grade. We got a 94 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we're in good shape to go to the next step, which is, I believe is an implementation plan. I touched base with Karen today, and it takes about a month. I think both money and guidance comes from the state complete street folks on that. So I think we're waiting for that, but we've passed with flying colors into tier 2, and the next step is the implementation stage. let's see, the National Grid issue that we talked about on the 22nd. I sent them a letter. They sent a letter back. And the short answer is we're all good. They don't have any projects that are beyond either property that National Grid has a fee for or where they have easements with the landowners. And they explicitly said that if, despite the fact that they don't have any town streets, town property, tree pruning removals that are in the offing right now, that if they do, they understand our interest and they will be back in touch with us before they do anything. So that was successful. Before I get to the two things I actually put down, so October 20th, I got to figure out, or we have to figure out exactly what can fit into an executive session item, but there are a number of things. Hopefully the flagpole issue isn't one that has to go into executive session to talk about as a potential litigation matter, but that's a possibility. The Warfield case that you got materials about, hopefully between now and October 20th, the court rules on the motion that was filed by the attorney who now represents the town through the insurance contract to get a default removed. Knock on wood, that happens before the 20th, but we still need to talk about where we are in litigation with respect to that case. And the two other things I want to talk about, and again, I think they are probably executive session matters, but I need to think about it. Two things. Number one, our public comment, it's not a bylaw, policy. I would like to at least have a discussion and maybe revisit some of the language in that. And specifically having to do with it's the last sentence or two. I don't think it's necessary. Certainly in my year and a half on the board, I haven't seen anything necessary beyond a sort of straight policy that we encourage public comment and public participation. I don't think anything beyond that is needed, but we should talk about it. And it also may touch upon litigation, so it might be an executive session matter. And finally, there was a public records request to the town, and it certainly seems like competent, effective counsel who prepared a response that was consistent with responses that have been prepared previously in response to public records requests. And I was a little taken aback when I saw it because there were about 3 pages of material that were produced in response to the public records request. And I'd say somewhere between 90 and 95% of the text was redacted. And I think it was properly redacted. I think if you look at I'm not a big fan of Massachusetts public records laws. I think it was properly redacted, and obviously counsel who prepared it thought it was properly redacted. But I want to have a conversation with counsel and with the members of the board, because I think there's great latitude for a town. And my view of public records requests is that our approach shouldn't be what do we have to produce in one bucket, and what can we claim an exemption, redaction, whatever for. I think there's latitude for a town to have a different approach, and as long as we're not precluded from turning over records, that we turn them over. And the reason I bring this up is the town can find itself, the town can have done in terms of policy, in terms of actions that it's taken, the town can have done absolutely nothing wrong, zero. And if we have a restrictive public records approach, we can end up in litigation about those public records when it just isn't worth the fight. We didn't do anything wrong. There's not a reason why we have to keep it redacted or falls into within an exemption, even though we could make an argument that it can. My view is that as a town, our approach should be, can we turn this over? And if we can, it gets turned over. Others may have a completely different view. I understand that, but that's my view. And I think it's worth a discussion.
Yep.
Now to my list. And I'll do them in reverse order. Selectman goal, Sam, I appreciate your attempt to improve on my product, but I reject it.
I can take it.
I just think
we've done more than was on the list. I think that's one of the things I was trying.
Well, let me know. Again, if there are things, shoot me an email that again, and that's one of the reasons I want to have a lot more detail in it, Sam, because there's no question things are going to fall through the cracks, and I'd rather that they fall through the cracks as an X than as
that was in the structure I sent you. So you didn't even read it. Go on.
I did read it, and it was 2 pages, which of course made it, vetoed immediately. All right, and so the last one is the liaison assignments, and I was ready to make these, or at least make a first pass at them, and then I happened to tune in to the advisory committee meeting, and they were talking about their liaison and their approach to the departments. And so I had a conversation with some of the department heads, and I just want to make sure before we head down this road that we are not, right now the way the budget process works is Mark, Brian, and their team work with the various department heads and the departments in terms of coming up with a town budget approach. The advisory committee has, whether it's liaisons or the committee as a whole, they pry down and they drive down into the department budgets and deal with the department heads, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have a vision of exactly what a selectman liaison role would be that wouldn't be duplicating one of those 2 things. And I want to make sure that we're not just doing work and creating work when that work is already being done. Does that make sense? So maybe, and I know Chelsea, this was your idea, or you were at least one of the folks with this idea. So I'm happy to talk about it now. I'm happy to if you want to designate Chelsea to have a conversation with me offline and talk about it. But is my concern misplaced? I'm just worried about, again, duplicating effort that's already going on with Brian and Mark and their team, and that advisory is doing as part of their statutory responsibility. That's my little spiel.
I do have a suggestion, but go ahead, Chelsea.
So I think where I was from on this one is we don't have a lot of the department heads in on a regular basis. I know we've had Chief Paulus in. I think we're planning on having Chief Achilles in. But we don't have a lot of contact with the department heads throughout the year. And if they're going to come in front of us once to talk about their budget, I don't think we're getting into the details of what they're presenting in the budgets. And I think we have a really hard year coming up that we need to be fiscally responsible. And I think we need to look at every line item that's going into a budget. And I think with our FY20 review, we uncovered items that were missed in FY20 and then carried into FY21. And so we know that we're going to have things that are going to come up through this year. So I want to make sure that we button down the budget process. And I was thinking by having liaisons, you build those relationships with the departments, the budgets more intimately than having to know all of the budgets. So that's kind of where I was going with the liaison idea.
Okay.
And Marty?
Yep.
If I can offer a thought, I was actually thinking a little different direction. Having been one of those liaisons as an advisory committee member, I think that's a very valuable role. I guess I'm willing to defer to advisory to actually dig in on the numbers details. I think there's another sort of different role for a liaison, which is more on the strategic level. I'd be very interested in understanding better what some of the departments are thinking of longer term in terms of opportunities, threats, pressures, et cetera, services that they want to provide, should be providing, et cetera. that will eventually hook into the budget process. But I think it's something that I sort of look at as our long range radar for some of these organizations that don't get a chance frequently to think about that or talk about it with us. So it seems to me that operates in parallel with the budget process. I think you need to do both. I'm prepared to defer to advisory on the numbers and think more on the strategic level with the department. So that's the role that I would actually be very interested in pursuing here.
Lisa or Brian?
Well, Brian, if you want to go first, that's fine, but,
Go ahead.
okay.
You jumped in
So-
first.
I think it depends on, you know, there's different members on the board that are looking at different things. I know, I personally delve into the numbers, you know, that's more what my forte is. You know, Sam, I understand the strategy and going forward, I'm looking at maybe the long-term goals. I don't know why a liaison couldn't do both. I don't know why we couldn't take the opportunity. I mean, I know, and again, it just depends the level of detail that you know, different members of the board want to look into. I mean, if we don't want to do with liaison, then, you know, I'll still continue to dig into the numbers, and I'm sure Chelsea will as well. I just think it makes things a little easier to do it this way. But again, I'm one of five.
Brian?
Yeah, so, and I guess the one concern that I had with the whole liaison process is just not wanting, you know, understanding that we need to have the department heads do their job as well, right? And we also need to have Mark and Brian do their jobs. And I think that over the last few years, and it certainly evolved a lot more while I was on the advisory committee myself, there was a lot more of an effort by our finance team to take initial budgets, to, you know, to do a good scrub on them and get them ready. And I almost see us as in a review position, and I don't want to insert ourselves into the process too soon and too early to make it seem to the department heads and to Mark and Brian that we're trying to do their jobs for them and that we're trying to get involved too soon. So I would say it's not that I'm opposed to it. I just think it's a fine balance between, you know, serving the role that we have to serve, you know, setting, you know, long-term policy goals, but letting, you know, department heads, you know, be the ones in, you know, responsible for their budgets, in charge of their departments, and, you know, allow the finance team that we have put together to do their jobs as well. So, you know, so I guess I see it as a fine line that we just need to make sure that we don't inject ourselves too early and make it seem as though we're trying to do people's jobs for them.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Let me just propose this, and that is that let's see if between now and the 20th, and I don't want to talk to both Lisa and Chelsea, so maybe it makes sense, since Lisa and I are going to be talking about the agenda and everything like that, for it to be Lisa. It seems her approach, Chelsea, is similar to yours, or her view is similar to yours. Between now and then, and see if we can come up with a hybrid approach, that maybe there are some departments that we absolutely want to do this to, and have liaison. Maybe there are others that make more sense to do it from a strategic standpoint. Maybe there are some where we want to try to do both, and see if we can come to some sort of process. I hear, you know, particularly Lisa and Chelsea on a desire to dig into the numbers. I'm not disinclined to dig into the numbers, but I'm happy to let others do it first, and then see the results of their work, and pick my spots on where to dig. And maybe there's an approach that can accommodate my view, your views, Brian and Sam's slightly different views, that also takes into account the fact that the department heads are going to be hearing from an awful lot of people about their numbers, particularly this year. Does that make sense? So I'm fine to have the conversation with Chelsea, but it might make sense to do with Lisa, just because she and I are going to be talking about agendas and the like as a vice chair anyway. So I interrupted you, Chelsea. Did you want to weigh in a slightly different way?
The only thing I was going to add was I actually selected my departments based on mine and Sam's approach. One, I wasn't so much about digging into their budget and understanding the numbers, but it was understanding how the department works and trying to get more information about how the department works, because I just don't know a lot about it. And so I'm interested in learning more. And I thought if I was liaison, then it would make sense for me to go ahead and dig. I guess I can go ahead and do that anyways and contact the department head to understand more. But that's kind of, I was using the liaison to do that. And then the other department, I felt like I wanted to get it more into their numbers. So it was kind of a dual purpose. And that's kind of how I selected what I was interested in. For the ones I didn't know a lot about.
Okay. All right. So don't not do anything you want to do, but give Lisa and me a chance. We be between now and the 20th and see if we can come up with a proposal for them. Fair enough? Okay. I am gonna, I kind of know what's coming on the rent mortgage relief CARES Act question. So Lisa, I am going to run to the men's room. And so the gavel is yours until I come back.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marty. So I had mentioned at our last meeting that through the CARES Act, Holliston has created a rent and mortgage relief program. It's funded through the CARES Act. I've had the opportunity since I first discussed it at our last meeting or first mentioned it. I actually was able to speak to the department head for the Holliston Youth and Family Services. And we talked a little bit about the program and how it's set up and, you know, how they initially set it up. And one of the things that I thought was best at the time was I wanted to update the board that, you know, we are digging further into this to be able to give the opportunity. Holliston, when they created theirs, started with only $25,000 and they were almost overwhelmed by the response from people. So I think we have a great opportunity here. The first round of funding closes out at the end of October. So, but the CARES Fund money is available for the second round through the end of December. So I think we have an opportunity here to set something up. I have a call scheduled with Sarah Cassell. She's also spoken to Ms. Weiner from Holliston. So I hope to be able to report back and, you know, and the group of us have a conversation and hopefully for the next meeting be able to bring something back a little more comprehensive to see if that's something that the town is interested in pursuing through the end of the year. So that was basically all I had on that. Yes.
That sounds like a great idea. How long did it take Holliston to get this set up? Is this something you have to apply for and wait 6 months for the feds to tell you have money, or can it happen pretty quickly?
No, she said it was relatively quickly because the funds are available, Sam. And one of the things we wanted to do was to get more in depth in how they did it. I mean, we're fortunate that we have a program that we could mirror. You know, a lot of Holliston is similar to Southborough. And obviously the goal would be, if we could do this, to be able to get this up and running before the end of October so we could take advantage of some of the funds that, again, the town would decide if the town wanted to do this. You know, we might be able to do a quick first round, but they've done all the legwork and all the groundwork to set the path for us.
Interesting question would be, are there things that they've found out that would make it less desirable? I have a hard time seeing what that would be. And do we know some of these things? For example, one of the recent EDC grants, they had intel that said if you apply for less than $30,000, they don't even review it, they give it to you. And so anything we know about, you know, are there thresholds there? You can get $100,000 easy, or you can't get more than 25,000 or whatever. So to understand what you apply for, but I sure don't see any reason why we shouldn't pursue this.
Okay, that's great, Sam. And I'll ask them that questions, you know, when I come back to give more information to the board. You know, I'll certainly share that.
I continue to believe there is a huge amount of COVID related and other federal money out there that they're desperate to give away these days. And we need to focus. That comes back to the grant writer conversation we've had previously. It'd be great if we could find ways to focus and learn more about that and take advantage of some of these things, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said, Sarah has also reached out to, to Jackie, who's her counterpart, and they've had a brief discussion as well. So, I mean, I think we're moving on the right path to get more information that we need. And again, I think through the program, how Holliston has it set up is, you can get up to 3 months rental and mortgage assistance. And depending on whether it's a studio, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, or even a 3 bedroom plus, you could get up to $2,000. And I think people that are extremely affected by COVID right now, that could be, a matter of losing your house or not. And it's a 3-month program. So huge opportunity.
Yep.
So, okay, that was it from me. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Any other member reports? Mr. Stivers.
A couple of quick things. Brian and I had the thrill of getting trained on the new ClearGov budgeting system, which actually is pretty exciting. Very helpful system. I think that's going to help us a lot with keeping track of the budget process going forward. So I think that's a great step forward. Also, I was curious if Mr. Shea is going to do a report. Last time he was going to, I hope, update us on the Deerfoot stormwater. So I'll wait and see if he has anything to say about that. That's it for me.
Do you want me to recognize you, Brian, or
or are you going to head to the men's room?
Yeah. No, so quick update. I checked in with Karen. We still do not have a report from PAR Engineering as yet. One of the things that they did last week was take the opportunity during one of the few rain events we've had over the last month to actually go to Deerfoot Road and observe conditions during the rainfall event from last week. So they're using that information to incorporate into their report. They haven't finalized it as yet. Initial indications are, and this is to be finalized, that an additional catch basin structure would not intercept an adequate amount of flow properly. So it does not appear that an additional catch basin is required. I've requested that they confirm that the water that is making its way to the roadway, that the infrastructure in place, have them confirm to us that it is appropriate. They have also discussed with Karen preparing a pavement grading plan. Again, if the infrastructure in place is appropriate to handle the water, then the next step is to make sure that the roadway is graded so that the water gets to the infrastructure system, to the catch basin. So they have offered to help Karen with a pavement grading plan for the roadway to ensure that the roadway drainage works properly. So hopefully we'll have this resolved by our next meeting.
Wow, Brian, great. That would be terrific. So good luck. All right, Chelsea, anything? Nope. All right, I think we are done with member reports. Mr.
Brian.
Purple.
So, sorry, actually, just one other thing. If there's information out and we'll have flyers distributed, Mark, I'll reach out to you and Vanessa to put on Twitter information about the event this upcoming weekend at the golf course. Hopefully we get great weather and a great number of attendees to come out and support a great cause. So thanks to the people at ALS1, thanks to the golf course management company, and hopefully it's a successful time.
Great, well said and well done, Brian.
Forecast is for great weather for Saturday and Sunday.
Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So just a couple of things. I did want to point out that Ms. Malinowski has also been trained on ClearGov, been looking into the ClearGov. I know she's as excited as anybody is about, being able to drill down into, the budgets a little bit. I've said all along, if this works right, it's going to be, I think it's really going to be great to try to answer a lot of those questions about the budget, but there may be some patience required as we enter the burn-in period, while we're entering in budgets. Hopefully budgets are going to be able to be entered in. Departments can start before the end of this week. I'll connect with Brian tomorrow and check on that. With regard to Ms. Braccio and the rent mortgage relief under the CARES Act, I know the town accountant has also been looking at this quite a bit and checking with some other communities to see how that's going to work. So I would encourage you maybe to speak with her and everything in that. You can connect and try and sync up a lot of that information, because she's going to have to help manage some of that along with the applications. And then to Mr. Stivers, the one piece with regards to some of the CARES Act and a lot of money being out there. There is a lot of money out there, but there's a lot of strings attached, and there's a lot of fences that need to be, we need to stay within. They recently, Carla has been hounding this, and they've recently opened it up to include additional flu clinic expenses that can be covered under CARES Act. Not the stuff that you normally budget, but if this year you anticipate having a bigger number of people, or you're going to have 2 or 3 dates, all the extra stuff is CARES eligible in that. So we're working with Board of Health to make sure that that we can have access to that money. With regards to the information that I had in the packet, I believe that Ms. Houlihan already did a fair job at speaking to the letter from Mr. Romano on behalf of ComCan regarding the final $50,000 payment of the community host agreement. His information that he has in here, is, somewhat accurate in terms of the Cannabis Control Commission and their review of the community host agreements and what is, what the businesses can be held to and what they may not have to be held to. But I wanted to put it in to make you aware that the letter was received by the town. I think, as the chair has indicated, this is something that's going to require a response from council, whether it be town council, special council. I'm not sure at this point. I will defer to the wisdom of the board for direction on that.
Mark, let me just jump in there for a second. And I mean, I'm happy to have a conversation with Aldo about it. It just is, I mean, a month ago or so, I was trying to track down a colleague of mine from when I worked out in San Francisco, and I put his name in and did the search, and it came up, cannabis lawyer. And it just is, it's become a highly specialized area of the law. And I just want to make sure this is an important enough issue for the town to take on. And I just want to make sure that our cannabis gunslinger is equal or better to their cannabis gunslinger.
As cannabis bullets.
Yeah. I won't continue that joke. So, okay. So that was the first item. The second one, again, it is nice to have good news. And I know we did talk a little bit about this, but Southborough did get $24,000, $500 from the Shared Streets and Spaces Grant Program through the efforts of EDC and our EDC coordinator, Marika. So it's a great opportunity for us to partner with the businesses when it comes to outdoor tents, when it comes to heaters, to try to help extend that outdoor dining season for them. And then also to do, some improvements in our green spaces downtown, whether it be planters, bicycle racks, maybe some picnic table seatings. And I know that EDC is already taking a look with Karen as to where some of those could be located to be something that is going to be easy to maintain and not, get in the way of any annual maintenance or seasonal plowing, things of that nature. So kudos to them. I think it's great. This is on top of the micro enterprise loan that EDC had already got. So Sam, they should be on the top of your list in terms of the groups that are getting the grants right now. So, we can always beat the bushes more, but I think this is a nice job, a nice effort.
Yep. Agreed.
Oops, sorry. We put that information out to make sure that everybody had that. So again, kudos. The final item, I had sent the board a memo. I believe that, we had talked about as a board doing a quarterly review on our executive session minutes and trying to determine what should be, what should be released. If there are things that could be released and maybe with some redactions, if there was more than one topic being discussed, or if there are things that are still hold the confidential nature of the executive session that should not be released. I went back to the beginning of calendar 2020. We had 6 meetings. And after taking a look at these and then talking quickly with Labor Council just to confirm, there are 4 of the 6 sets that can be released in their entirety. Their contract negotiations with department heads that have been concluded. There is 1 that cannot be released at this point. It's regarding litigation that is still ongoing. And so that is something that should remain in executive session. It should not be released at this point. And then the final one, there was contract negotiations with the department head, but there were also negotiations with the town union. And it's recommended that those minutes can be released, but the negotiation pieces for the union should be redacted. And so those are the recommendations that I would bring to you for those 6 sets of minutes. If in fact you're comfortable with those, then I can put those on for the next meeting for them to be released. I also had a request from a member that we try to take a look a little bit further back. I know that, when we had some issues with, minutes getting lost from getting approved or released or posted a number of years ago, Mr. Shea, in his wisdom as chair, had us start an Excel sheet, which basically tracked the minutes, track the meetings and track the minutes and the date of the meetings and the date the minutes were approved, and ensuring it was done in a timely fashion. What we're doing now is we're adding columns onto those, which basically tells us whether or not, if they're executive session minutes, whether they've been released and whether they've been redacted. And so we're going to go back, start going back a couple of years at a time to see if there are things that still have not been released from executive session that should be released from executive session. So hopefully it's not going to be another quarter before I report back on this. There may be something as soon as the meeting on the 20th to be able to give you some additional recommendations on things to be released.
So Mark, to follow up on the 20th, the executive session minutes that you've identified as being releasable will be on the agenda for us to vote on to release.
Correct.
There's the likelihood, somewhere between possibility and likelihood, that there'll be some additional ones based on the research you're going to do going back farther.
Yes.
Okay. And then just as a practical matter, I'm comfortable with this approach that it just becomes a standing item for the first meeting of every quarter that we do an inventory of executive sessions to make sure that there's nothing that hasn't been released that should be released, or that otherwise has been handled the way we need to be handling executive session minutes. So that's my plan going forward, unless I hear something to the contrary.
I agree. We should get that all cleaned up. No reason why we can't do that historically.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Can I just ask a process question?
Yep.
So the list here, have these executive session minutes been approved but just not released?
Correct.
So they've been approved.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So just process wise, we're approving minutes at the next meeting like we do our regular minutes, or is there an executive session that you're approving minutes in?
No, you will have at the next meeting, you will have a list of these 4 or 5 sets of minutes to release them, not to approve them.
Right.
So
Sorry, I meant, do you usually approve minutes during an executive session then?
Do you approve the minutes? No, we normally approve them in open session.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
approved in open session, but not included in the packet, correct?
Got it.
And
Okay.
they go into the packet once we vote to release them.
Thank you.
Or
So-
they would then be put on the website rather, so
Right.
that we would, so that they're
So
available
Chelsea,
for viewing.
the quirky thing about the executive session minutes is if I send them out and I'll just pick on Sam. Sam doesn't agree that, that this is accurate and he wants to change this or he wants to talk about something. We then have to schedule an executive session to talk about the executive session minutes.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
So yeah, so if they go out and no one has an issue, then they go on and they're approved. But if you have to talk about them, you have to go in executive to do it. So yes, you're correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And just generally, my view is that, I mean, in an ideal world, as soon as executive session minutes became releasable, you would release them, but that's impractical. And I think that doing it on a quarterly basis hits both the letter and the spirit of the law. So.
Yeah. Nope. All set, Mr. Chairman.
All right, moving
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry. Sorry. One more thing. Brian Shea can do it. I can do it. I just wanted to know, there's been a lot of questions about, well, you raised your hand earlier. So there was a lot of questions that we've been getting, and I've talked with some of you in that about water rates and about the water bills that have gone out, and you know, people have been asking a lot of questions. There was something that was, and I'll give Karen Galligan a lot of the credit for this. She put together a lot of information. I know that she's spoken individually with some of you about the bills and tried to give you an understanding of some of these things, but she put together some information to try to provide some insight into why, you know, people are seeing the water bills, you know, that they are. That information is out on the website. It's on the front page under the news flash. If you subscribe for the email blast for news flash, you know, you'll get notified that it's there. And I can't remember if Tom told me that it's automatically sent to you, or, you know, you could just click the link to go to the new post. So that information is there. We'll continue to post updates and things of that nature with regard to, you know, to that topic, you know, if we get more questions and things that that we don't feel are answered. So please take a look at that, you know, when you get a chance, and you know, feedback is appreciated. Now I'm done.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. I am going to hold, I think, just C. Anybody else have any holds?
A for me.
Okay.
I had a comment on A as well. Thank you.
Okay. Anything?
D and E, please.
Okay. Lisa, you all set?
I'm C, so I'm with you, Marty. Thank you.
Okay. So I move to approve consent agenda items B, F, G, and H.
Second.
Discussion? No? Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. Those items are unanimously approved. Let's start with A.
I had one small suggestion for A.
Okay.
Minutes, page 8, the ADA charge, middle paragraph, it refers to Ms. Signs. It should be Mr. Signs. We would appreciate the update.
Okay.
That's it.
Brian, did you say you had a hold on that as well?
I did on page 6 of the minutes.
Yep.
Under paragraph, well, subparagraph I, that deals with update on Deerfoot Road extension.
Yep.
The last sentence, I was not talking to myself. That should read Chairman Healy requested an update at each meeting. Mr. Shea agreed.
I also had one change. On page 4, under the paragraph with Brian Ballantyne, sentence 4, the one that starts with Ms. Malinowski asked about board and advisory transfers. At the end of that sentence, it should say they went over budget, for example, deferred compensation, which is a straight calc.
Okay. The first two were easy. Is the third one? Did some? Who's taking? Who's the scrivener for this? Is that you, Vanessa, or is it you, Mark?
Yes, I'm taking notes, and I'm sure Katie is as well.
Okay. All right. So with those edits, I'll move to approve the open meeting minutes from September 22nd, 2020.
Second.
Discussion? No. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye, unanimously approved. B, the golf course committee charge.
That was just approved.
Oh,
C.
oh, I'm sorry. You're right, it was. C. Oh, well, let's skip C and do, I'm assuming it might be typos or the like on D and E. So if I'm wrong, but let's go to D first, the COVID-19 remote learning.
Yep, so we discussed at our last meeting that it was going to be the fire chief, not his designee. So I just wanted to take or his designee out.
Okay, yep, no, I remember that discussion. Good point. Anyone else, anything else on that? I guess it turns out, and Mark or Vanessa, that St. Mark's doesn't need to do this year.
So yeah, that is the case. I'm sorry, Vanessa, you want to go?
No, you go ahead.
So that is the case at this point right now, that if you, according to the state, if you have 5 children or less, then you do not need to go through this process to get this exemption and get the approval from the town. They did have 6, they did have 1 child drop out. Right now they're at 5. So we'll continue to monitor this if in fact we do need to do these documents and get these approvals.
Okay, but it's still worth getting this in place as an approved policy and form.
I think it'd be much easier to get this in place now and have it available to us if in fact those numbers change. I don't think we want to go back to recreate the wheel when they actually need to get it in place now.
All right, so with Ms. Malinowski's edit, I'll move to approve the COVID-19 remote learning enrichment policy and forms.
Second.
Discussion, no. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye, unanimously approved. The ADA grievance and non-discrimination policy, I'm not sure who held that.
That was me.
Okay, Chelsea?
So a couple of things on this one. So I've been going through our policies as part of our goals for this year, and I actually came across a prior ADA policy. And so I checked with Vanessa today to make sure that that one will be removed if we approve this one. So I just wanted to make sure that as we are removing policies that we take the proper procedure to remove it if we're replacing it with a new one. So that's comment 1. The second one is, I thought at the last meeting we discussed the difference between a complaint and a grievance. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood that a complaint goes to the ADA committee and a grievance goes through this process. And if I misunderstood, then I didn't follow the conversation last time. So I just wanted to make sure that there is a difference and that there is a separate form on the website that I actually couldn't find. Other than it was like a form you could print out, not an online form. So I just wanted clarification on that.
So so just for my edification, Chelsea, what are the where is it referenced that complaints go to one place and grievances go to another?
So if I could interject, I think this is where I stepped over myself at the last meeting and made reference to the policy that was on the warrant that we didn't actually enact at the town meeting, that was bypassed. So I was actually referencing something that didn't even exist yet. So I apologize to everybody for gumming up the works at the last meeting and discussing that, but that was my error.
But that's still going to be on the warrant in the future, right?
So we'll need to clean that up at the time, but as of right now, it doesn't exist. That conflict doesn't exist.
But if we're going to put a policy in place, I don't want to refer to something as a complaint if that's going to be changed when we do it on the warrant at a future town meeting. Are the words interchangeable if the warrant is, or the article is accepted on the warrant?
Well, the way that the other article is written, and I don't have it in front of me and I'm going by memory, but I thought that that committee would serve as a conduit to, to voice complaints, to voice issues. And the question I've raised is then, what is the distinction between raising a concern with that group, versus filing a formal grievance or complaint under this process? So maybe, I don't know what to do, but
I don't know what the article said, the article you're talking about says, but I will tell you that for the most part, the whether it's ADA or some sort of discrimination or something like that, there usually are two tiers, and a grievance is a less formal tier that is available to someone, and someone can file a grievance. I don't know if that is what the intention is of the article. I mean, but normally a grievance is different than a complaint. A complaint, it carries more formality with it than a grievance.
We can always change our policy fairly quickly if we need to, in terms of something gets passed by town meeting with that too.
So why is this called a grievance procedure then? Should it be called a complaint procedure?
I have no issue, it probably, maybe that fixes it, Chelsea. I mean, they're usually always called grievance procedures, but to your point, and again, I just was looking at the bylaw that's in the warrant that was for acceptance in June, and we pushed it off. I don't see anything in there. It talks about concerns, not complaints, that, for the committee. And then obviously, I think Sam alluded to this, that they are advocates, for a lot of these things and for accessibility issues. But it may simply be that we change, instead of a grievance, it's a complaint form. And then I think it's consistent, because grievance is really only used twice. It's used once in the title, and it's used once further down, I think, just to reference the policy. So you change those both to complaint, that might be it. But Mrs. Hale doesn't agree.
No, I do agree. I just wanted to add a quick footnote that these templates came from the Central Mass Regional Planning Committee. So I didn't want you to think that we chose that title grievance at the top for any particular reason. We didn't. We took their template and then we tweaked it, adding information that we thought, would be pertinent to Southborough.
Okay.
Knowing that it comes from them weighs in favor of revision.
And Vanessa, can you confirm that the form is not an online form? It's like a form you have to print?
Correct. And on that point, I looked at that again right before we jumped on tonight. And we are trying to make so many of our forms on the website fillable documents, which would be so much easier, especially when we are close to the public right now. So that is on our to-do list to make that a fillable form.
Okay. And the ADA committee has not met on this policy?
They have not. We have reached out to the chairman and he did not provide any feedback. So he does have the documents and had no feedback.
You actually had a couple of conversations back and forth on email today. And
correct.
So Chelsea, if we change the word grievance, which happens at least a couple of times in there, to complaint, because they talk about complainant, that seems to me to make everything consistent. Does that fix it?
Yes, and I think in our motion, we need to remove the old policy, just to make sure that, as we renew and come in, we don't have conflicting policies.
Yeah, we would appreciate that. That's as as you and Mrs. Braccio have been going through so many policies, many of them are quite old and have never been officially rescinded. So I appreciate that.
And just one other comment on this also, if we could, it directs you, it gives a web page and it's listed as the ADA grievance form. We may want to resave the document. So it doesn't say grievance. If somebody's going to reference it from the town website, that it says complaint.
Yeah.
So.
I quickly saw 2 references to grievance on the paperwork there, but we ought to do a word search and replace all the grievance with complaint.
Agreed. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further comments, I just want to thank Vanessa for her work on this. As you probably know, this is one of the requirements that we have to have for CMRPC, who has agreed to work with us, file a grant with Mass Office of Disabilities on our behalf for an ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, which is what the town meeting approved $40,000 for us to do. And hopefully it's going to cost us a lot less to have it done through CMRPC. So I appreciate Vanessa's work on this, John Parents also. done some work on this, as well as Tim Davis, in trying to make sure we have all our facilities and everything else lined up for people to take a look at, if the grant is awarded. Now, if the grant isn't awarded, I've already told CMRPC that we have a funding source for this. So they're doing the work anyway. I just would rather not pay for it because they've got a couple of really great consultants lined up that have done good work in other communities with their self-evals and transition plans. So it'll be a benefit to us either way. I just would rather do it on the cheaper side. So thank you to everybody who helped with this.
All right, well, Vanessa, thank you.
Thank you.
So I will move to approve the, get the title right, ADA complaint and non-discrimination policy. Modified, I saw twice that the word grievance in the title and in the last or next to the last policy that it be replaced with complaint or complainant, whatever the equivalent word is. And that in approving this, we at the same time rescind any previous ADA policies that might conflict. That's my motion.
Second.
Discussion? No. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. C, one-day alcohol license applications, Chestnut Hill Farm events. Lisa, you want to go first?
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I have a few concerns on these events. One is conservation had approved 24, an expansion of the parking lot to include 24 parking spots. So when I look at the number of people attending these events, for instance, on the 11th, the October 11th event, it's 200 people total. They're breaking it into 50 people minimum slots, but there's also another Hike with the Goats event going on. I don't know how many spots are included in that. And I want to make sure that the parking stays within the envelope. In past events, sometimes it's gone over and it's parked further down closer to the trailhead. But if in looking at the map that conservation approved, there's a very clear defined line that sits at the north side of the approved 24 spots. And it clearly states, once you cross that line, that land is fully subject to the conservation restriction. And I don't see anything in the restriction that allows for overflow parking from an event in the farmstead. So I just want to make sure that the intent of the CR, which obviously is for scenic views, that we're not blocking views on the parcel that we have, that the land is subject to the CR in. And also I just want to make, I think there's some questions raised with the CR itself, and I think we need to have them answered, whether that affects these three events or not. I guess my main point would be that if we approve these tonight, that we approved it with the caveat that there is to be no overflow parking across the line, which is the CR land. I know it's happened in the past, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen, because again, overflow is not addressed in the CR. I know Aldo has given an opinion on the 10 spots within the envelope of the parking, but this is actually outside of parking. And my understanding is that that land there is considered prime agricultural soil to begin with, which is, if you look at the CR itself, it talks about the scenic views and the upland meadows. And I guess I would not be comfortable approving this unless I know that the events are going to stay within the farmstead parking that was approved by the Conservation Commission. I know that was long-winded, but I'm hoping everybody understands what I'm trying to say, that north of the 24 spots, I'll just quickly reiterate, north of the 24 spots approved by the Conservation Commission is covered by the conservation restriction. And I don't see anything in the restriction that allows for overflow parking for events that the farmstead may be having. So that is one of my concerns. And I would be in favor of the events if I was assured that we're not eroding the intent of the investment that the taxpayers in this town were looking for when they did the CR, which was scenic views. And I guess I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to discuss it further.
Well, and let me weigh in.
Yeah.
I mean, I've dived pretty deeply into the conservation restriction and the land management plan, and this is what perplexes me. And you saw the letter I sent to the asking for written supplement to the application. I got a response to it, and it's the response that I thought I would get. And here's I don't know how other people feel about this. I know how I feel about it. The events, which as far as I can tell are as far from an educational event as you can get. They're fall festival type things with hay rides and walking with goats, et cetera, et cetera. There's not at least what I consider educational program. It doesn't approach it. And the trustee's position is that sort of an event is authorized under the conservation restriction as an educational activity. Educational activity is defined in the conservation restriction as a program of instruction for the development of knowledge related to fostering the purposes of this conservation restriction. Someone convince me that what is being advertised for the events at Chestnut Hill falls under that definition. And number two, many of us have professional certifications that we have to go through on an annual, semi-annual, whatever basis that are educational, relating to our professions, or if we're doing public service stuff or something like that. And I have never been at an educational event, ever. I've been doing it for a long time where they serve alcohol, period. So,
or with goats, probably.
I'm sorry?
Or with goats, probably.
Well, it's the alcohol thing. Yeah, there are a few goats, believe me. I just don't, I am very uncomfortable. I've been watching the conservation meetings involving the trustees. I've been watching planning, and I really think that the conservation restriction and the land management plan is being stretched beyond certainly what the spirit of those things were intended to be. And so I don't know what the vote is going to be on this, but I know what my vote is going to be. And that is, I'm not voting to approve these alcohol licenses. I just, I agree with Lisa's points about the parking and using a facility that's supposed to be pristine, it's farmland, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, we don't have room in the parking lot, we'll park on the farm. Really? Where dogs can't walk, but we can park, scores of cars there? I just think that we've lost our way a little bit in terms of what this conservation restriction and land management plan is supposed to accomplish. So anyway, I'm one of five, but alcohol licenses, to the extent we have authority here, they're not getting my yes vote.
Comment?
I'm sorry?
Comment here?
Are you?
Comment from me, if you please.
Oh, yeah, no. Asking my permission? My goodness.
Come on.
Go ahead, Sam.
I've also been following the Concom meetings on this, and I think some of those conversations have been very productive recently, more so than previously, I think. But I also share some of your concerns, Marty, and I'm also concerned about the scale of activities there. I have followed a lot of the things that the Chestnut Hill Farm has been doing. I think it's a great program, great asset for the community, and a great use for that land. but I guess I never had the vision that that would involve events with, 200 people or whatever coming in there. Just the basic physical limitations of that site, given the Chestnut Hill Road condition, et cetera, parking in that area generally, is a real stretch in terms of having people of that number in there without interfering with the passive enjoyment concept in terms of what I thought was the original CR restriction. So I've been hearing that they're doing things to expand the parking in ways that are consistent with the various restrictions in there, and I think that's a useful pursuit. But I wonder how much they can do that without, again, running into other limitations in terms of just capacity to hold those kind of events there. So I guess my vision of the longer term is to find a way to have, a cap on the event size to not overload the infrastructure around there. And I'm less, I guess, concerned about the alcohol license or education limitations, et cetera, as long as there's opportunity for supporting the farm programs without getting in the way of the town residents' rights to access the property and find convenient parking spaces and so forth. But I think short term, I agree that we need to fix that problem before we continue to support events there. So that's sort of my high level take on it.
Chelsea O'Brien, Brian? No?
Well, I guess I can count the cards, but I guess I would just voice what I believe is going to be the minority opinion. And I don't have a strong feeling towards it. I just think, I haven't been to any of these fall events that they've had at the farm, but I have been to a couple events in the spring that they have had. And I just think this presents, a great opportunity for members of the community that might otherwise not go to the farm. It attracts them to it and introduces them to it. We had discussions ourselves with the trustees back in the spring when the entire facility was closed. And, part of the working cooperatively with them to reopen it was an understanding on parking restrictions, and that, parking needed to be limited to the lot itself. So I guess I would be in favor of moving forward with it with, an understanding on the parking limitations that exist at the site. But I otherwise would be in support of the program that they're offering. So I'll leave it at that.
Is there an option for them to manage the near-term events in a way that would not create significant overflow parking, that would create congestion there that would be a problem? I'm not sure.
Well, can I add one other point to this? So again, I'm going to use the event on the 11th. So what is the maximum number of expected attendees? 200 people total, 4 90-minute time limit slots with 50 people maximum at one time. So you do have cars coming in, but also one event ends at 1:30 and another one starts at 1:30. So how is the overflow if you have 24 spots? How are you going to handle potentially the backup? Are we going to be backing up Chestnut Hill Road, which is a scenic road as well? Are we going to be creating other traffic issues? I guess that's my worry, is going outside of the confines of what conservation approved for approved parking spots. So, that being said, I mean, I understand and I agree, Sam, to your question, but I just don't know how you're going to facilitate that number potentially of vehicles. On top of that, doesn't include the people that are going and running with the goats or hiking with the goats, the 12 o'clock people or the 1 o'clock people. So where are all these cars going to go? And the only explanation that I can see, or that has happened in the past, is it goes over onto the conservation land that's restricted under the CR. And I don't believe that it's allowed.
Yeah. And again, go ahead, Chelsea.
So the only thing so Lisa went where I was going to go.
Oh, sorry.
Different events going on at the same time, and they're overlapping. And I can tell you, if I spent So it would cost us $85 to go to the fall festival. I'm going to be there those 90 minutes if it costs me $85 to just get in and not even have something to drink. So I'm pretty sure that that's how most families would look at it, is it's 90 minutes. So I'm not leaving at 1:25 so that somebody can have my spot for their 1:30 slot. So I think if it was spaced out a little bit better and you did 12:30 to, 1:30 or 12 to 1:30 and then 2 to 3:30, then I think at least you're giving yourself, at least it would show that there was a plan in place for people to be coming in and coming out, maximizing the 24 spots that you have. But I think running 2 events at the same time, that concerns me as well. And Marty, for one of your points, I do think that they do have some educational programs. I think hiking with the goats could be considered educational. You're getting kids learning about animals and that kind of thing. So that I can see falling into the education part. They do the book bugs during the week, which is a great program. So I think that they do have some programs that would fall into that category. I'm not sure about the brew hike and the fall festival, but those are some of my concerns. Is it's kind of it's not showing a well thought out plan for transitions and using the space that they have.
I'm open to giving them some flexibility if there is a believable plan that can avoid some of the congestion, and maybe give them a little time to sort out some of the longer term issues here. But I think, to me at least, it's problematic to have a longer term plan that says we're going to host larger and larger events and more close proximity to them schedule wise. So maybe the long term view is you got to cap the capacity to not create the traffic congestion or contention for parking in there. And I think there's probably a plan that could do something like that. So, again, short term, what do we do? But
So we've got applications for alcohol licenses. That's what's in front of us.
All right, I'll take the plunge. I will approve item C in the consent agenda for the one-day alcohol license applications, Chestnut Hill Farm events, Fall Fun on the Farm, October 11 and October 18, the Blue Moon Hike, October 10.
Is there a second? I will second it for discussion, Mr. Shea.
Okay. Is there any flexibility on their part to come back to us, or can we limit it somehow with the approval to limit the total number in there at any one time, or get them to spread out the timing a little bit, as Chelsea had suggested? I don't know if they've got the flexibility to do that at this point in the process. Maybe they've advertised it and there's no more time to readjust. Not sure.
If I may follow up on that point, Marty. So initially I would have considered it with the caveat that, they only use the 24 parking spots, but who is going to monitor that? Are we going to have a police officer down there? I mean, saying 24 and so it ends up going over the line, it goes into the conservation land. Again, I think it defeats the purpose because who's going to monitor it? Are we going to go stand down there and ask everybody and direct traffic as they're coming in and out? I mean, I don't know if setting the requirement that you can only use those 24 spots, because my understanding is from the Concom meeting that SOLF isn't allowing them to park across the street. SOLF says that it doesn't meet the requirements over there. So I worry what standard we're setting without some form of commitment, whether it's taping off that area or whatever. But are we creating a bigger problem based on how it's, what's been advertised and the number of people that have already bought tickets?
Or do we give them a chance to demonstrate they can manage it? And, if they can't, then that creates another issue that we got to deal with.
Any other discussion? All right. Moved and seconded. Ms. Braccio.
No.
Ms. Malinowski. No. Mr. Shea.
Yes.
Mr. Stivers.
No.
Mr. Healy is no. All right. So number 5, other matters properly before the board. Sam, I'm assuming you agree with Mr. Morris, and we're going to continue the tree policy, or are you going to charge on alone?
Do it myself. If I may, I'm happy to continue, and we'll work to resolve the issues that have been raised. I just wanted to alert people that the open issues seem to be two things. One, what kind of policy does one have for hearings on scenic roads? There's two different views in terms of, is it, are there exceptions on scenic roads where the tree hearing is not required for the planning board, or do all tree hearings on scenic roads go before the planning board as well as the tree warden? And second, question about appeal process. State law says appeal for normal hearings go to the Board of Selectmen. There's a view that says appeals for tree warden and planning board hearings go to court, not to the selectmen, because you've got one elected board versus another elected board. And so there's a question about sort of priority there. So those are the questions that the group has been discussing actively. And I think will probably come up when this group discusses it. So if folks want to think about that a little bit in advance, those seem to be the remaining issues that we'll work to resolve over the next couple of weeks here, and hopefully get back on the agenda for the 20th.
Sam, what I will, I mean, I think those are legitimate issues, and I'm not quite sure. It's going to be difficult to convince me that we should adopt a policy that essentially takes us out of the equation. In other words, if in fact, and it makes perfect sense that you're not going to pit one elected board against another, and so our appellate role would be taken out, that's going to be a tough sell for me. More importantly, I didn't get a sense from the document that the mindset was, my mindset going into this would have been, and I think it should be, what is the problem here that we're trying to address? And I think this policy bites off a ton more than could possibly be necessary to address the issue as I see it, which is we want to make sure that important trees, is that the right word? A lot of trees out there, but
Yep.
Important trees, potentially important trees, get due process. I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
Trees
Due
that people
process
care
for trees.
about. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if, and I'm not proposing this, but again, if that's the concern, and we've got a process that involves a tree warden having hearings, it strikes me that if we've got a competent tree warden and a competent process for noticing it, that we're 3/4 of the way there. And then whether it's to the Board of Selectmen or otherwise, and I think it should be the Board of Selectmen, there's a right of appeal. Presumably, if the planning board, any member of the planning board, felt that there had been a mistake or undue, not sufficient consideration for, again, an important tree, they could certainly push that issue up to the Board of Selectmen. And I'm not sure why that sort of simple process isn't a better route to take than essentially not just creating an entirely new wheel, but a whole stagecoach. Yeah. I mean, that policy is a mouthful. That's my reaction to it.
And again, I think you're right for trees that are not on scenic roads. I think it's very straightforward. Where it gets complicated more is on scenic roads, which state law gives the planning board a direct role there. And the question is, how far does that role go? So we will continue to noodle about that, as well as reinforcing that there are things that we can do and probably should be doing as far as getting advance notice from utility companies, which is, again, governed by another set of regulations.
Agree completely. Agree completely. I just think that there's a much narrower issue that's of concern that can be addressed much more narrowly than what currently exists in that packet. It's just, again, it's a mouthful.
Yep.
So
and that's my the simple version.
Yeah,
so
that's my 2 cents.
We had a bigger version. So, okay,
All right.
we reconvene and try it again. Thank you.
Do we need to move to table this or just not act and it can come up again? Okay.
I think so.
All right. Discussion of partial waiver. What is this on for, Mr. Purple? 5A?
Yeah, so this was something, I've been having conversations with Miss Esposito when it comes to our liquor licenses. The Section 12 licenses, which are the big alcohol licenses, the restaurant all alcohols, the restaurant wine and malt, the club licenses. It accounts for about $11,200 in revenue from these licenses on an annual basis. There have been some movement among towns in our area and you know, that we're aware of, that because of the issues and because of the struggles that some of these businesses have had during COVID and everything, that license renewals, they're giving them discounts on their license renewals. Some of them are looking at 25%, some of them are looking at 50, and some looking at 10%. And we do normally send out all the license packages sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and wanted to give the board a chance to, you know, to potentially weigh in on this. If you were interested in doing something like this to try to give a little bit of a benefit to some of these license holders, you know, who've, you know, probably had a tough time, you know, these last 6-7 months.
Having just lobbied extensively to stop alcohol consumption over at Chestnut Hill, I feel the need to make sure that there's someplace people can go.
I'm supportive of local businesses. I think some level here makes sense. So
I agree.
25% maybe.
So yes, I'm not, like I said, I'm not pushing you one way or the other. I only want the board to at least be on the front side of the wave, or, you know, not to get the licenses out to people with the amount that they owe, checks come in, and then we decide we want to do something, and then it becomes a little more logistical nightmare. So I cede to Ms. Braccio's love of process, and try to see if we can get this on the front end if the board wants it. And if you don't, that's fine too. It's just, I wanted to at least give you the chance to address it.
Yeah, and I guess my view is, man, I mean, they're all great places, but I have made a more concerted effort, my wife and I, to get to local places. So really, anything we can do. I mean, you know, looking at it, and yeah, the towns got tough times and everything like that. I mean, it strikes me 25% credit is a minimum. I'd be fine going for the 50% credit. I just think these are about, this is never going to happen again, knock on wood. And I just think that doing anything we can to let these businesses survive is worth it.
I agree too, Marty. And I think that, you know, looking at some of these on the list, some of them just recently opened back up. So they were closed for months. So I think anything that we can do to help, I mean, we want to help our citizens. Why would we not want to help our businesses as well? So I would also be in favor. I mean, I don't think we're talking a large, I mean, $5,600 is a lot of money, but at the same time, in the scheme of a $51 million budget, to be able to help a business, you know, I think it's well worth the investment.
Agree.
So I will move to approve a discount, the 50% credit outlined by Mr. Purple in the chart provided for the, and Mark, those are the only licenses we're talking about for the town?
They're the only Section 12 licenses, yes.
Okay, for the Section 12 licenses identified in the handout.
Second.
Discussion, none. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. It's only 10:15. What do we want to talk about for an hour and a half?
Let's talk about trees.
No,
2 hours on that.
I move that we go to public comment.
Are there any hands raised? There are not. Going once, twice, sold. Mr. Shea?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. Vanessa, Mark, everyone, thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.